Great Tribal Chief. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 401, Damn One Cut. Feliza was awake from freezing. When he opened his eyes, he only felt cold and icy, as if he had returned to the time when he was almost frozen to death 2 days ago. And Feliza only felt that the bridge of his nose, right cheek, and lips were all wood. There was no feeling at all. The only thing he felt was a very strong smell of rust in the cavity. Feliza knew that the smell of rust was actually the smell of his own blood. When I was young and frivolous, when I was in a duel with a certain dude in the country, after my nose was broken by the opponent, this was the smell in my mouth. It's just that the taste this time is obviously stronger than the one more than 10 years ago. The surroundings were very dim, and there was fire coming from his right side, but the left side of his body was dim, and he was covered with several clothes, and there seemed to be hay under him. There seemed to be voices not far away, but there was always a sharp squeak in his ears. Feliza tried to hear those words clearly, but he couldn't hear clearly. In this constant squeak sound, those voices seemed to be far away in the sky. Feliza tried to move, but he was horrified to find that he seemed to be unable to move his whole body. It was a feeling of freezing and dying frequently. Hey, Feliza didn't want to be frozen to death just like that. A few days ago in the cold and desolate wilderness, he had witnessed dozens of brothers being frozen to death. He didn't want to be one of them. However, his dry voice made him sound like the cry of a newborn kitten. However, this seemed to be in a room. Although Feliza's voice was very small, it was also heard. Immediately, Feliza felt relieved that several familiar figures surrounded him. The Major is awake, the Major is awake. A familiar voice rang in his ears, and Feliza knew that it was his own lieutenant named Mendoza. Feliza felt that his body was supported by 7 or 8 hands, and a thick pile of dry thatch was tucked behind his back, which made Feliza feel a little more comfortable. Not far in front is a blazing bonfire. This bonfire is firmly bound by the surrounding stones, so that the branches in the flame cannot be scattered around. A bowl of warm water was quickly drunk by Feliza, and he felt that he was finally alive again. Where is this place? Aren't we brought to that indigenous tribe? This bowl of hot water has another effect, which is to make Feliza's dry voice much better, at least to make him speak. Major, we are indeed in that aboriginal tribe. We were brought back in the dark, but while we were being escorted, you tried to do something unnecessary. As a result, you were taken by an aboriginal. It fell with the of the rifle. Also, Major, your nose should be broken. Our military doctor has died in the wilderness. No one will correct your nose now. Feliza understood what caused the blackness before coming over. Immediately he smiled bitterly. It seems that when dealing with the Indo-Caribbean, he always likes to hit those with the of his rifle. Is it retribution now? He tried to raise his hand to touch the bridge of his nose, which he didn't feel, but he found that this action was a very extravagant action, at least in his current situation, that he couldn't complete this action. Feliza's efforts finally turned into a helpless sigh. If you break it, break it. Fortunately, your life is saved. This is better than anything else. Mendoza, where are we now? The temperature of the campfire made Feliza feel that he was slowly recovering. Major, we are locked up by those natives. The 104 remaining of us were divided into 3 waves of imprisonment and kept in different houses. We also saw these houses just now. They were made of rocks. It is built with something we don't know. It's very strong. We don't dare to make too much movement. There are several indigenous warriors carrying muskets guarding it. If our movement is a little bit bigger, I'm worried that after they hear it. Feliza turned his head laboriously, and he saw that there were about 30 brothers hiding themselves in the thatch. Mendoza and several other officers were surrounded by the bonfire. They seemed to be discussing something. The room is big and cold, but it is better than outside. After all, the house can block the cold wind, and there is a bonfire inside. At least these brothers can't freeze to death. Mendoza, What's the situation here? Felisa was silent for a long time before continuing to ask questions. The lieutenant officer known as Mendoza shook his head. Sorry, Major, we don't know what's going on. The only thing that's certain now is that the big guy locked us all up. But when you were in a coma, the big guy came here, but saw that you were still in a coma. So he asked his men to set up the bonfire and got us a pot and some water, but there was no food. Oh, yes, before leaving, the big man told me in fluent Latin that he would come again tomorrow, but he wants you to think about it tonight and think about why you are here. That the big man also said he would listen to the truth in the future, otherwise he would throw us into the wilderness. This made everyone including Felisa shiver involuntarily. Although the situation is very bad now, it is better than the few days in the wilderness. At least there is no need to worry about being frozen to death. www.wuxiaspot.com. Felisa fell silent again, but his heart was already regretful at this time. I knew this would happen, and I shouldn't have promised General Carlos to lead the team here, in his own capacity. Although General Carlos was his immediate superior, he did not dare to make excessive demands on himself. Alas, if it wasn't for the Governor Martinez who just took office in New Orleans that he had a good relationship with his father, how could Carlos let himself come here? Isn't it because he fancied his relationship with Governor Martinez? With this relationship, I can mobilize several armed transport ships from New Orleans up the river, and then inquire about the French. I didn't expect the news to be heard, but this journey would be so dangerous. The fleet struck a rock and sank. More than 300 soldiers died of freezing and drowned more than half. The remaining soldiers also froze to death, more than 40 during the 3-day wreck. In the end, the remaining people were also arrested by the natives. This weather, this task, this everything. Chapter 402. The Problem of War Horses. After a frightening night, the next day, a black and thin native, accompanied by a group of tribal warriors, walked into the stone house, and then made no expression on Felisa's broken nose. A correction. The guy's movements were so vigorous that Felisa's sore throat became hoarse, but the black and thin guy was unmoved. In the end, this guy babbled and said something when he left, but unfortunately, the only Frenchman who knew Cherokee had frozen to death on the road, and Felisa didn't even know what the guy said. What is it? However, these aboriginal actions also made Felisa completely relieved. After all, these aboriginals can treat the major's nose and bring them food. Although it is the roughest cornmeal food, it is enough to explain this. The indigenous tribes have no desire to kill them. Otherwise, they won't do these things. Just keep them starving to death in these 3 stone houses. Big Bear, I think those Vasicus should be unkind. I can feel this, but they seem to be scared. If you let them go for a few more days and give them some measure, these guys will. It broke down. In Stone Bear's room, the lynx said with a rare smile. The thin black man who gave Felisa the nose is naturally a lynx. As a member of a long-haired cow tribe, as a person who has seen stone bears from a young age, and as one of the few people who stone bears admire most, he has never changed his name for Stone Bears. The lynx would call Stone Bear his guardian only in public, but privately, he called Stone Bear the name of Stone Bear in the long-hair cattle tribe Great Bear. The Bobcats have this qualification to call Stone Bear Uncle. Bobcat, thank you for your hard work. Since you have this judgment, then do as you say. Let those Vasicus regain their strength today, and tomorrow we'll take them to the Oyan Mountain to mine raw salt. Speaking, Shi Xiong stood up and walked to the window, looking at the falling snow outside, and said with some distress, "This snow is always so down, and it is estimated that the horses prepared by Colonel Jones will not be able to rush in. The cost of raising these 500 war horses, especially in winter, is very high. Well, people are not as good as the sky. Felisa and the Spaniards were just a small accident, and Stone Bear didn't care about it at all. Not to mention the Spaniards in the sky. Even if a group of British people want to covet bullets, in this kind of weather, it will be the result of no return. The Stone Bear will definitely kill them in the wilderness. When the weapon like the grenadier is not necessary, it will not appear in front of the Europeans for the time being. Now Shi Xiong is more worried about the horses that Colonel Jones brought. Some time ago, Colonel Jones sent someone to the Gaoshu tribe to pass on a message, saying that the horses had been gathered, and he was about to send someone to send it over. As a result, the messenger had just left for a few days, and it started to snow continuously. Naturally, those horses cannot be sent here in such weather. If there are dozens of war horses, Shi Xiong is not worried, but with a total of 500 war horses, Shi Xiong was no longer worried. As Shi Xiong feared, in this era, the cost of raising a war horse is extremely high. The cost of raising war horses in a year is even higher than the value of war horses themselves. If 500 war horses were kept by Colonel Jones for a winter, he would definitely bankrupt the colonel. Although the Gaoshu tribe now has hundreds of domesticated bison, but the Gaoshu tribe has no pressure to raise these bison, because under the guidance of the Stone Bear, the Gaoshu tribe has long started to use silage. Although the straight-line distance from the High Tree tribe in Jamestown is not too far, there is no silage technology there. Although silage technology originated in ancient Egypt, Europe did not get this technology until the end of the 18th century. Moreover, the production technology of silage was first introduced to the New World from North America by the Nordic people, and then from the New World to Britain. In other words, now that Colonel Jones probably doesn't know how to use and make silage. Without this kind of feat, if you want to raise such a large number of war horses in the winter, that would really bankrupt the Colonel Jones. The link said, "Don't worry, that Colonel Jones should raise these horses for you. He is reluctant to bear our old-fashioned rifles. The big deal, we'll just give him 100 or 200 more guns when the deal is over." Shi Xiong shook his head and said, "We cannot place our hope on others. Uncle Bobcat, you know these horses are very important to us. At least half of our future depends on these horses. Therefore, we cannot take it lightly." "Why don't I take a trip?" Bobcat thought for a while and asked. "Can I go in this weather?" Shi Xiong frowned and asked worriedly. "It shouldn't be a big problem," said the Bobcat. "We can walk along the shore of the Big Bend. The water in the Big Bend is plentiful and the temperature is high. The snow on the shore is not so deep. Besides, the further east you go, this snow it will be smaller. The Appalachian Mountains block the cold wind coming from the north. As long as you drill out of this mountain, the snow over there should not be that big." The more the lynx talked, the more confident he became. In the end, he firmly said, "Great Bear, leave this to me. It just so happens that our tribe is also training a group of warriors of our tribe. I plan to bring the 200 warriors who are ready to train, riding a cow to drive over. A cow is more reliable than a horse in this kind of weather." But how to solve the feeding problem of the cattle and the war horses? How to solve the low temperature problem? Shi Xiong shook his head. "Uncle Lynx, don't take risks. Even if we receive those war horses are in such a cold day, it's also difficult to reach our tribe." "No, Great Bear, according to what you said, if you want to raise these horses for one winter, it will bankrupt Colonel Jones, so he is likely to disperse these concentrated horses again. If he does, then it will inevitably delay our plan for the beginning of spring next year. Therefore, I need to take a trip. Even if I don't bring these horses back, at the very least I have to send a batch of silage to Colonel Jones, so that he can feed them without any burden." War horse. Shi Xiong heard this www.wuxiaspot.com and realized that he had gotten into the tip of a horn. "Since the mountain is not coming to me, then I will go to the mountain." As the Bobcats said, since the war horse cannot be brought back, why not send a large amount of silage to Colonel Jones? In the past 2 years, the Gaoshu tribe has obtained a huge harvest of soybeans. In addition, from the end of summer to the end of autumn, the people of the tribe have been making silage every day. Now the silage in the Gaoshu tribe is still adulterated. There are so many concentrates of soybean and wheat. Even if a batch of horses eats 15 caddies of silage plus coarse material plus fine material a day, it will only take up to 60 days from now to the temperature rise. That is to say, when the temperature rises, it needs about 900 caddies of silage plus coarse material plus concentrated material. The amount of feed required for 500 horses is more than 200 tons, which is not a problem at all for the Gaoshu tribe. And no matter how poor Colonel Jones is, at least there should be rough materials. In other words, the Gaoshu tribe only needs to pull the silage and concentrate, which saves at least half. Isn't it just over 100 tons of feed that can hold up 150 tons in the sky? 200 bullock carts pulled over twice. Chapter 403, Get Off the Horse. Shi Xiong has always been an activist, and since he decided to send feed to Jamestown, he started to pick up the food that afternoon. The tribe's bullock cart has been remodeled several times, and now an bullock cart can easily pull more than 1,000 caddies. However, feed takes up space, so a large cart is filled up to more than 700 kilograms. But it doesn't matter, the tribe can make up more than 200 bullock carts. Pull at once and it looks like more than 70 tons is close to 80 tons. It is winter now, and the sky is freezing, especially the two rivers used as power sources are frozen, so in addition to the necessary coal and iron mining and steel making, Gaoshu tribe has basically stopped a lot of other work. A lot of ox carts used for transportation are vacated. This time I went to Jamestown, Shi Xiong was going to send a battalion of more than 300 people out. The commander of this battalion is a fierce dog, that is, the young warrior of the Crooked Deer tribe who was going to give Shi Xiong a little bit of prestige, who is known for his brute force and ferocity. The entire battalion consists of more than 100 veterans and 200 new recruits. The Bobcats also followed with a team of scouts, and by the way helped the fierce dog who had just been promoted to the battalion commander take control of the team. Had it not been for the Bobcats to insist on not serving as middle and senior officers, the battalion would be led by the Bobcats. As for the route, there is no need to worry about it. It was this route that the Expeditionary Army took when they first expeditioned to the Carrie people. Now, as the Cherokee people continue to send troops to the Cree, and the Cree people are continuously transferred from the south to the north, the route that the Expeditionary Army marched during the first expedition to the Cree it has become a very mature route. Many floating bridges have even been built across the river. Therefore, there is no need to worry about this eastward route. After 3 full days of loading and other work, the more than 200 bullock carts were filled. Then the team, which stretched for nearly 3 miles, set off slowly. In this kind of weather, even if you hurried, even if the road conditions were better, it would take at least 20 days. And after these bullock carts come back, they have to run again. 1 trip is definitely not enough, 2 trips are enough. However, the more than 200 cows just ate a lot of forage on the road. Therefore, for these 500 war horses, the Stone Bears have paid a lot of money. But this is really no way. Who will let God not show your face? If these heavy snows were not followed, it is estimated that the 500 horses would have been sent here long ago. After finishing all these things, Shi Xiong remembered that there were still a group of Spaniards on the side of Zioy and Shan waiting for him to deal with it. So, 5 days after being arrested, Major Feliza, who still had a bruise on his face that made people feel scared, finally saw the big head again. For this big man, Feliza and his men had an inexplicable mood at this time. Say grateful to this guy. They are really grateful. After all, they saved them. This is an undeniable fact. But in the same way, they also have hatred in their hearts. Nothing else. Although they were saved by these natives, it was really hard for them to live these 5 days. Especially Feliza, as an aristocrat with a good background. Where did he suffer such a crime? On the way, the fleet hit a rock and sank. They had no choice but to start crossing the wasteland under the leadership of the indigenous guide, and they almost froze to death. Even now, the frostbite on their faces, hands, and feet is very itchy every night, making life worse than death. On the first day of coming to the tribe, Feliza's nose was smashed by a gun butt, leaving a shocking bluish-purple on her face. What's even more unfortunate is that for the past 5 days, except for the indigenous soldiers who guarded them, they have not paid any attention at all. Although I can eat enough every day, and there is a fire at night, it won't be cold, but mining the blue and white stones on this small hill every day is not human work. It's really uncomfortable to hold a cold iron drill and pick in such a cold day. After 5 days, Even the Spanish soldiers who wanted to escape most did not dare to mention it again. Every day's work will exhaust their last bit of strength, and the severe cold seems to have no meaning to subside at all. Even if they are let go, they dare not leave the tribe at the risk of being frozen to death again. These people have all experienced the journey that almost froze to death. Let them go through it again. They will never try. Mining these bluish-white stones here is hard work, but at any rate you can still eat and drink every day, and you don't have to worry about being frozen to death. It's better than being frozen to death in the wilderness, and then the corpses turn green by the hungry eyes of wild wolves. The end of eating. It is not that these Spanish soldiers did not try to communicate with the native soldiers who watched them, but one of them was language barrier, and the other would not pay attention to them at all. So these days, these Spaniards have really been smashed. Now the big head who was obviously the leader appeared again, even if this guy was more terrifying than the devil. But almost all the Spaniards were slightly relieved. Don't say anything else, at least this guy understands English and can communicate. Feliza originally wanted to come forward and talk to the big man, but as soon as he moved, he caught a glimpse of the rifle in the hands of an indigenous soldier guarding them. Feliza was immediately stunned. The injury on his face was not healed. He didn't want to get another but fortunately, after the big man came, he immediately called Major Feliza out. Let's talk. www.wuxiaspa.com. What is your purpose in coming to our Gaoshu tribe? I want to be honest. The cold words of the big head immediately reminded Feliza of the words that Lieutenant Mendoza said that night. Coupled with the torture of the past few days, Feliza didn't mean to lie at all, want to get out of this ghost place quickly. Dear leader, we really want to exchange with you the method of making a powerful weapon that can explode. For this, we can pay any price. Feliza pours benzene in a bamboo tube. Everything he knew was said. Compared to his own fate, those weapons are nothing. Besides, he really came this time with the idea of using a transaction to obtain that kind of weapon production method. It's a pity that all the food pulled on the 4 boats sank into the river along with the 4 boats. During Feliza's recounting process, Shi Xiong kept staring at his eyes. After Feliza finished speaking, Shi Xiong was sure that this guy did not lie. It seems that these 5 days of dismissal have completely destroyed their psychological defense. Chapter 404, Impermanence. As Shi Xiong guessed, Major Feliza, including the Spanish soldiers, had completely collapsed at this time. If it weren't for food every day, a safe place to sleep, and the survival instinct to support them, maybe this group of people would be dead. Mining raw salt in the winter is really not a good job. In fact, since last year, even the people of the Gaoshu tribe have stopped mining raw salt in winter. This work is really hard. But Feliza, did they have any alternatives? Run? Where are you going? To paraphrase a later online phrase, the whole country has been liberated for 70 years. Where can you go? Isn't that the case? It's freezing cold this day, and besides the mountains, there is a wilderness infested by wild wolves. Where do you go? In this kind of weather, there is only one end to running out: death. It is nothing more than being frozen to death or being eaten by wild wolves. But without running, 5 days of high-intensity physical work in a row can really break a person. On one side is death, on the other side is the heavy physical work that life is not as good as death. If the Spaniards caught in the middle do not collapse, then they can call the soldiers. Therefore, when Shi Xiong, the man who could directly determine their life and death, appeared, Major Feliza, as the leader, knelt without hesitation. Isn't it just telling the truth? What's the matter? Compared to this hell-like little salt mountain and the freezing weather, as long as it is not a fool, everyone knows how to choose. Only then did Major Feliza feel fortunate. Fortunately, he didn't come here with the idea of hard grabbing. Otherwise it would be really hard to explain to this big guy today. In that big defeat, although nearly 1,000 Marines under General Carlos died, neither General Carlos nor Major Feliza paid much attention to this matter. They were more concerned about it, that kind of powerful weapon. If you can get this kind of weapon production method, let alone 1,000 people, even if you pay 10,000 lives for it, you can do it at all costs. This kind of weapon is related to the nation's fortune. As long as the Spanish army is equipped with such weapons, The unification of the entire European continent is definitely not something that only exists in a dream, and the unification of the four oceans is the same. Although General Carlos is the immediate boss of Major Feliza, and Major Feliza is only General Carlos's adjutant, in fact, the real status between the two is not as big as the apparent gap. Feliza's father is the famous Count Fernando in Spain, and he is very powerful, far from being comparable to that of Major General Carlos, who is just a baron. Feliza is the first heir to Count Fernando, so even General Carlos must respect it. Feliza was able to become a major at a young age, not just because of his identity, it also has a lot to do with his own abilities. Therefore, when the Mad Bull commanded his 500 brothers to bombard the Spanish Semino coalition forces with grenadiers, whether it was Carlos or Feliza, they all saw a bright future from it, Cayenne too. After all, Carlos is a relatively pure soldier, he saw his bright future in the army from this powerful weapon. Major General Carlos had no doubts if he could hand over the production method of this weapon to the great His Majesty Carlos III. Then the position of an admiral is appropriate, and even the title of knight has a great possibility to be raised by 2 levels. And Feliza saw an extremely brilliant money path in this weapon. The Fernando family is the third-ranked arms dealer in Spain, and Feliza's father, Count Fernando, has always wanted to drive the 2 guys ahead, go on, but never get a solution. And if the method of making this weapon can be obtained by the family, then with the tremendous power of this weapon, the Fernando family will have absolutely no problem becoming the #1 arms dealer in the country. Even the title of Father's Earl has a great possibility of raising 1 level again. Turning the Count of Fernando into the Marquis of Fernando is the dream of the entire Fernando family. As a result, 2 foxes, one large and one small, immediately reached a resolution after seeing that kind of weapon with great material power, that is, to get the method of making that kind of weapon at any cost. According to General Carlos's idea, that is to use violence to snatch. General Carlos even took the risk of letting some of his warships run aground, and had to drive in several sailing warships along the river. But this idea was immediately rejected by Feliza. The reason is simple. First of all, although the Royal Navy's North American squadron also has a few smaller warships, these warships are sailing in the sea after all. Even if Major General Carlos risked stranding to drive inland along the river, how much can it be driven? Far? No one is sure about this. If the ship ran aground because the river was too shallow just after driving in, it would be a sincere joke. After all, this is the late autumn season, and almost all rivers in the New World of North America have entered the dry season. Going upstream along the river is obviously not a good way. Secondly, even if the battleship goes in, what's the use? Do you really think those natives are fools? Stand there and let your warship fight? Please, people have war horses, but they can't beat warships, so they can ride war horses away from the river. Your battleship can't turn into a bird, or a chariot can leave the river to chase people. The method proposed by General Carlos was rejected by Feliza, and in the end even Major General Carlos could not find any way to obtain the method of making that weapon. In the end, the two decided to use what Feliza said, the method of making this weapon in exchange for materials. Anyway, those natives are just natives, and they probably won't realize how important this weapon is. And what is most lacking in indigenous people, it is nothing more than food. This point, whether it is General Carlos or Major Feliza, has long seen it from the Semino. Therefore, if you pull 10,000 pounds of white rice or wheat, you definitely don't worry about those indigenous people who are not tempted. As for other more precious things, www.wuxiaspa.com. Major General Carlos and Major Feliza thought it unnecessary. Food is already the most precious thing for the natives of the New World in North America, and food is enough. Moreover, this patch of food is protected by 300 musketeers and small-caliber artillery on 4 armed transport ships, so you are not afraid of others to grab it. In addition, Feliza and the Governor Martinez had a good relationship, so they went upstream from the Mi River, turned into the Big Bend, and finally reached the High Tree Tribe, which became the final result of the two people's deliberations. It's just that neither of them thought that the plan was wonderful. but the plan really couldn't keep up with the changes. It had just entered winter when they set off, and the weather was far from this bad. But when they walked along the Mi River for more than half a month, and then delayed for several days from the French fortress of Akron, and then went upstream along the Big Bend, they waited for a long time to find a guide in the middle, but they were about to arrive. At the destination, the blizzard wiped out their fleet. The rest of them who escaped by chance were almost frozen to death, and finally they were arrested. Things are so impermanent. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 405, Flat Glass and Warm Pavilion. Dear Leader, I have told you everything you want to hear, and I can swear to God that what I say is true. So, can I know what you plan to do to us? Kill us or let us just keep doing this kind of hard work? Feliza, who had said everything, seemed to let go of the biggest burden in his heart, but at this time he appeared to be more calm. Shi Xiong smiled and waved his hand to interrupt him. He could see that although Major Feliza didn't speak English very well, he should speak the truth. Although there are some things in it that are beyond my expectations, they are generally inseparable from each other. Isn't it just a small tossing barrel? Is it worth it? Well, it seems to be really worth it. Shi Xiong muttered in Chinese, and no one understood this except himself. Well, Major Feliza, so let me tell you clearly, I didn't want to kill you. Although you didn't have any good intentions when you came here, our tribe has always been very kind and we don't like killing people. We don't like killing. Don't like killing. Killing. If it weren't for the jailed now, Feliza would really want to jump up and spit on the big man in front of him. I have seen shameless people, but I have never seen such shameless people. Don't like killing people yet. The 1,500 Marines of our North American squadron almost killed your men. Semino's 4,000 soldiers killed more than half of you. This is also called not like killing people. Would you like to order billion. Of course this can only be slanderous. Feliza is not stupid. Of course he knows that once this is said, the next moment he has to be raised by the big man and thrown into the wasteland outside. Yes, what you said. We have already felt your kindness. If it weren't for your kindness, those of us would have frozen to death on the wasteland. A dog licking must be a must. Being able to behave like a man. At this time, the man is a knife and I am a fish, so I shouldn't lick the dog. Besides, people have already said not to kill their own group of people. When should they not lick at this time? If this big guy is unhappy, his group will be miserable. This sounds comfortable. Shi Xiong smiled and nodded, and then continued, but, you have so many people, we can't feed you in vain, so you must use your labor in exchange for your daily rations and shelter. This is no way. It's not that we are stingy. In fact, you should have seen the situation of the tribe, such a big stall, so many people, except for the little ones who just know how to run and the little ones who are too old to move. Others there are things to do. So, you are here, and you have to do work every day. I understand this. I understand it. It is only natural to exchange labor for food. The common people in our country are also like this. It is fair and we can accept it. Shi Xiong smiled and nodded again. Since you understand it, it's easy to say. From now to the beginning of spring, there are about 3 months left. You can live here for these 3 months. What you need to do during the day is what you have done these few days. I also know that this kind of work is very hard, but I can guarantee your food and shelter, as well as your safety. Of course, if you are willing to go back, I will not stop you. It's just that you have also seen it. It's cold outside, and it's a death when you go out. No, my dear leader, of course, we will not go back at this time. Here, we will listen to you. Feliza immediately showed his loyalty. Just kidding. If you really leave here at this time, it will be a brain dead. Why are you going out? Do you still have to experience the despair of a few days ago? Whoever loves to go, I won't go anyway. Working hard here is certainly exhausting, But you don't have to worry about losing your life. Didn't the missionary in the family who once went to the mysterious East to preach scriptures learn a lot of famous sayings from the mysterious East? One of the sentences seems to be, "It's better to die than to live." Well, it should be this sentence. How appropriate it is to use it here. Well, since you have such an idea, that would be great. You will tell your subordinates later. It is best to get the consent of all of them. I don't want you to have infighting. Well, if you don't want to stay, I will send someone to send him away immediately. Shi Xiong nodded and said in a low tone, but Felisa was shivering in her ears. After Shi Xiong said this, he turned and left. When he reached the door, he turned and said to Felisa, "Well, Mr. Major, come to me after you and your subordinates have accounted for a while." "Well, it's best to bring a few officers over. I need to discuss some things with you." After speaking, the tall figure of Shi Xiong disappeared from the door. Shi Xiong is not worried that the Spaniards will not stay. It doesn't matter if they don't want to stay. The big deal is that they have lost more than 100 hard work, which has no effect on the Gaoshu tribe. If they want to stay, there will be more articles written there. For example, what I want to talk to Felisa in a while is one of the things Shi Xiong wants to do. Sure enough, it didn't take long for Stone Bear to return to his residence. Felisa and 3 Spaniards wrapped in animal skins were escorted by the soldiers. The 3 guys wrapped in animal skins were obviously officers under Felisa. The 4 Spaniards were stunned as soon as they entered the house. They weren't overwhelmed by the decoration of this big house. To be honest, the stone house that Shi Xiong lives in is not small, but the decoration inside is really lackluster. Very general and general. The 4 of them were shocked by the temperature in this room and the bright glass windows. Although some large households in Europe are now beginning to use glass for windows, that kind of glass is usually very small. Where is such a large piece of flat glass? Also, the temperature in this room is too comfortable, right? This temperature is almost indistinguishable from spring. Unfortunately, there is no fireplace or other stoves in this room. www.wuxiaspot.com, and there is no smell of smoke. This is really amazing. In fact, how do they know that this glass window is no longer a rare thing in Gaoshu tribe? Although it is still impossible to make flat glass by flat drawing or float method, the simple rolling method is still no problem. These large pieces of flat glass used to make windows are all made by rolling. As for why the room is so warm, this one is even simpler. There is an inconspicuous square hole close to the wall outside the front door of the house, 1.5 meters deep, with refractory bricks and stone slabs covering it. This square pit is the hearth. Coal is burned inside, and there is a fire path built with stones at a depth of about half a meter under the cement concrete in the house. One end of the fire path is connected to the hearth and the other end is connected to the chimney on the roof. Burning coal in the furnace and covering it with a slate, the firework will follow the winding fire path to heat the entire floor inside the house, and then enter the airtight fire wall on one wall, heat the other wall, and finally emit through the chimney out. This is actually the warm pavilion of the big family in ancient China and even the palace. Where did Felisa and the gangsters have seen this? Chapter 406, Plot. There were several people sitting in the house. Upon seeing the style, Major Felisa knew that these people should be high-ranking figures in this tribe. However, the big man did not sit in the middle, and in the middle seat was a young woman. "You haven't eaten breakfast yet? Come on. Here are some things to eat. Go to the next room and eat. I have something to say to you when I'm full." Shi Xiong pointed to a door leading to the next door. Immediately, Felisa and the 4 of them were led into the room by 2 tribal warriors. This seems to be a restaurant, because the 3 of Felisa smelled a scent as soon as they entered the door. They also saw the pot in the corner of the room that was gurgling, steaming outwards. The inside was full of stew. Pot of meat. Needless to say, Felisa and the 3 of them are like wild dogs that have taken off their heads. Regardless of being hot, he stretched out his hand and fished out several pieces of stewed pulpy beef from the pot and stuffed it directly into his mouth. Even if it was hot, he wouldn't stop. Until one of the tribal fighters who followed raised the of the rifle, Felisa and the others hurriedly stepped aside. Another soldier walked over with a look of contempt on his face, and began to fill the beef and the rich soup with a big iron spoon. A total of 4 bowls were filled, all of which were head-sized wooden seed bowls. Then the 4 guys with green eyes pounced on it again in the lobby outside the house. Hong Yun asked Shi Xiong in a low voice, "Duh, any bear? Do you really plan to sell the remaining muskets to these Spaniards?" "Why not? Our expeditionary force now has about 1,500 Ferguson rifles in hand. These rifles are the best rifles for those Vasicus, otherwise the Colonel Jones in Jamestown would not agree. Exchange 500 war horses for 1,000 Ferguson rifles." Hong Yun, Bigfoot and Jiao Niu nodded involuntarily. After the expeditionary army and an eastern expedition, the Guardian returned to the tribe and said that they had bought 500 war horses from the British with 1,000 second-hand rifles. At first, no one believed this, but then it won't work if they don't believe it. Although the horses had not been exchanged yet, they all saw the 1,000 musketeers of the expeditionary army hand in all the Ferguson rifles in their hands. It is an indisputable fact that the entire tribe has been preparing fodder for the 500 war horses far away in Jamestown in the past 2 days. They really did not expect that 1,000 rifles would be able to return 500 war horses. That's a war horse, a full 500 war horses. The entire Gaoshu tribe has accumulated 2 years of hard work. Even the trade-related births. All the horses and ponies in the tribe are less than 300 horses. Among them, 70 or 80 are temporary. You cannot ride a pony, and there are only more than 200 horses that can be ridden. As a result, the Guardian returned 500 horses without making a sound. This is really nothing to say. Now the tribe is developing and producing new rifles. The new rifle Hong Yun developed by the 4 alchemists has also seen several of them. The power is far more powerful than the Ferguson rifle. And now the work of the tribe is focused on the production of new rifles. A full 1,000 people from coal and iron ore to coking, steel making, barrel drilling, and rifling are all done to improve the new rifle as much as possible. Work hard for the output of the rifle. Of course, the production of grenades has not stopped. That thing is the real big killer. And it is impossible for the tribes and expeditionary forces to give up grenades. Currently, the maximum production capacity of the tribe in 1 day is 7 explosive Bear 1766 rifles. From now on, there are still about 80 days before the beginning of the spring and west expeditions. At the very least, the tribe can produce less than 600 rifles. Counting the Bear rifles produced before, the expeditionary army can only be equipped with 800 musketeers by then. Guardian, but if you sell all the remaining 500 Ferguson rifles, the number of musketeers in the expeditionary army will only be maintained at about 800 at that time. Isn't this number less? Bigfoot asked with some worry. 800 musketeers are enough. Don't forget that we are using the burst Bear rifle. The power and range of this rifle are far from what Ferguson rifles can match. The 800 musketeers are better than the previous 2,000. The musketeer is more powerful. Don't worry, I know this in my heart, Shi Xiong said confidently. Besides, don't you think that selling Ferguson rifles is a very profitable thing? Shi Xiong asked with a smile. Hong Yun, Bigfoot, and Jiao Niu thought about the 500 war horses, and they nodded all at once. Then, since selling this rifle we eliminated has such great benefits, why don't we sell the rifle to the Spaniards? We can exchange 1,000 second-hand rifles for 500 horses from the British, so why can't we? Enough to trade another 1,000 rifles for 500 war horses from the Spaniards? Hong Yun and the others took a breath, but their faces were extremely surprised. Jiao Niu asked, "Stone, you mean we still need to continue to produce Ferguson rifles?" "Why not? Don't forget that the production process of the Ferguson rifle is different from the production process of the burst Bear rifle. The barrel of the Ferguson rifle is cast. www.wuxiasput.com. The equipment we use to produce the Ferguson rifle are all IM-free. Anyway, the tribesmen are all in Medong. So why not mobilize and let the tribes start to produce Ferguson rifles? I think, with our tribe's production capacity, over a month's time, these 500 can a Ferguson rifle be made? Several People nodded again. The production process of Ferguson rifles is far behind the burst bear rifle, and the speed of casting the barrel is much higher than the speed of drilling the barrel. Therefore, it is absolutely no problem to produce 500 Ferguson rifles in more than a month. But if you can really exchange 1,000 Ferguson rifles for 500 horses from the Spaniard, then it's definitely worth more than anything. So, everyone approved of my plan? Shi Xiong asked with a smile. Hong Yun and they nodded in unison for the third time. Well, after a while they finish eating. Let me take care of this. I promise to get another 500 war horses from the Spanish. All of them smiled happily. At this time, as soon as the door rang, they saw Major Felisa and the four of them walking out of the restaurant next door with contented and unfulfilled expressions on their faces. The look on their faces is enough to show that this beef stew made them eat very well. Since you're eating so deliciously, then there will be more delicious things happening next. Chapter 407. Bait. Almost 10 days, in this freezing season, almost 10 days without a full meal. This is an unimaginable thing for an aristocrat who has grown up with good food and clothing. But it's on Felisa. So, this hot beef soup this morning really caused Felisa to almost swallow his tongue and his stomach. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Shi Xiong would have doubted where the big pot of beef went. That's a big pot of beef, enough for 10 people to eat, but all of these 4 guys have poured it into the stomach. Are you full, Mr. Major? Shi Xiong asked with a smile. Felisa respectfully made a standard aristocratic ceremony. Dear Chief, thank you very much for this meal. I promise, this is the best meal I have ever eaten in my life. Shi Xiong came over with a smile, and grabbed the guy's shoulders and said, Major, since we're full and drunk, let's talk about serious matters. If you have anything you want to say, as long as it is Feliz Fernando that can do it, I will definitely do it. Feliz quickly showed his loyalty. Haha, it's actually nothing. Before you said that your family is the third-ranked arms supplier in the Kingdom of Spain. I think I heard it right. Felisa moved in his heart and immediately nodded with certainty. Yes, our Fernando family is indeed the third-ranked arms supplier in the country, and our family has always wanted to improve this ranking, but it is a pity that our family has nothing right now. A very good weapon, if you can use that kind of weapon, your lord. Hee, Mr. Major, I think you must have misunderstood something. To tell you the truth, the powerful weapon you want is actually not a new weapon, you can make it yourself. Huh? It's impossible, right? Chief, I'm quite proficient in weapons. I can see that the kind of weapon your troops use is definitely a new type of weapon. Speaking of this, Felisa naturally will not be fooled easily. He came here with all his hardships and almost died in the wilderness for this kind of weapon. Stone Bear shook his head and asked, You should also have grenadiers in the Kingdom of Spain? You should be able to make the kind of grenades used by grenadiers, right? Of course, the grenadiers are all elite soldiers in our Royal Spanish Army, and of course we can make the grenades they use. I don't know how powerful the grenade you use is, or how far you can throw it, but in our tribe, I made a grenade with decent power. At the same time, I also used the grenade that the Romans used. The hand-push ballista has been modified. This modified ballista is not used to fire crossbow bolts, but to fire grenades. It's impossible. Felisa was like a cat whose tail was stomped on. I know the hand-pushing ballista used by the ancient Romans, but the range of that thing is not that far. Your weapon can have a range of up to 5, a distance of more than 100 yards. So, this is an improved hand-pushing ballista. And what you think is impossible can't be achieved without us, Shi Xiong said with a smile. The respectable leader, can you let me see your improved hand-pushing ballista with my own eyes? Even just a glance, Felisa pleaded. Mr. Major, I don't think I can agree to your request. Shi Xiong simply refused. Imagine if your family had this improved ballista. Would you let others see it easily? Felisa showed a disappointed look on his face. It is true, my honorable leader, my request is indeed a bit excessive. Shi Xiong smiled and patted him on the shoulder, saying, It's okay, but what I can tell you is that that kind of weapon is indeed fired with an improved ballista, and it fires a grenade made by ourselves. How powerful is it? You must have seen it too. After a pause, Shi Xiong continued, I know you won't believe me until you see that weapon with your own eyes, but I can't show you that kind of weapon. So, in order to prove that our tribe has a lot of with powerful weapon research and development capabilities, I can show you another weapon of our tribe. That weapon is also quite powerful. But, my honorable leader, I am only interested in your kind of weapon. Felisa looked a little reluctant. But just reluctantly, obviously not. So, under Shi Xiong's half-forced and half-coupling method, Felisa and the 3 officers under him followed Shi Xiong to the shooting range outside the tribe. Is still the same procedure used to show Colonel Jones the Ferguson rifle outside of Jamestown. Good things don't need to be said much, just show them. Although the Ferguson rifle is far behind the explosive bear rifle, in this era, it is enough to sling all the rifles in Europe. Rear-mounted rifled gun, and whether it is effective range or reloading speed, it is far from the main rifles of European countries. The Spanish Navy is still at the pinnacle of Europe in this era, but their army really doesn't look good enough. So www.wuxiaspa.com, when the effective range of the Ferguson rifle was up to 200 yards and the reloading speed of more than 6 rounds per minute was revealed, Major Felisa, who was not interested in this rifle before, almost took his eyeballs stared out, and even his 3 subordinates looked shocked. Although the gun cannot be compared with the power of the gun, when a good rifle appears, the shock is still very huge. The Ferguson rifle is such an advanced rifle that is enough to shock the whole of Europe. So, after the Ferguson rifle was displayed, Major Felisa never mentioned the powerful weapon anymore. All his thoughts fell on this giant rifle. Although I have not been able to see the powerful weapon in person, Felisa is almost certain that the weapon is an improved ballista that can fire grenades. Since is improved from the ballista, you can let the family try it out after you go back. It doesn't matter if the attempt is unsuccessful. After all, there is a new rifle that can replace that weapon. If you can imitate this rifle in front of you, all soldiers in the Kingdom of Spain are equipped with this rifle, then the invincible army of the Kingdom of Spain will definitely stand on the top of Europe again. There is an invincible Spanish fleet on the ocean, and the same invincible Spanish royal army on the land of the European continent. Who else in Europe can be the opponent of my great Spain? Chapter 408, Opportunity. In fact, throughout the 18th century, Spain was in an awkward position. From the end of the 15th century to the beginning of the 17th century, Spain's invincible fleet shocked the whole of Europe. How powerful was the Spanish invincible fleet at that time? Just enumerate a piece of data. At that time, the Spanish invincible fleet had more than 150 warships, more than 3,000 cannons, and tens of thousands of soldiers. In the heyday of the fleet, there were more than 1,000 ships, which is the greatest guarantee for the invincible fleet to run across the Mediterranean and Atlantic. So at that time, no country in Europe dared to touch the Spanish tiger easily. But with the continuous rise of other European countries, Spain's dominance in Europe has been greatly threatened, and many European countries have made it their goal to surpass Spain. Although the Spanish invincible fleet was invincible at the time, the Royal Spanish Navy also had a fatal weakness, that is, there was no outstanding commander. This weakness has not been resolved in Spain for hundreds of years, which also led to Spain's decline after more than 100 years of glory. The rise of the Netherlands, Britain, France, and Prussia posed a great threat to Spanish rule in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. These countries are also constantly challenging Spain's sea power. In order to protect its own sea power, Spain is also constantly using naval warfare to deal with its enemies. One after another naval battles continue to weaken the strength of the Spanish invincible fleet. From the Battle of Grevillina in 1588 to the Battle of Downs in 1639, Spain's invincible fleet was finally consumed in war after a war. The Vitality was finally pulled down by the Dutch navy in the Battle of Downs, and the sea coachmen began to cross the Atlantic. Throughout the 17th century, the Dutch, British and even French navies began to become stronger, especially just entering the 18th century. At that time, the Habsburg dynasty that ruled the Kingdom of Spain was extinct, leading to the outbreak of the Spanish Throne War. That war completely decayed Spain, which was still barely able to remain a first-class power. Of course, Although the French won the war in the end, the French were also greatly injured and did not complete the annexation of Spain at the beginning of the war. Strategic objectives in Europe. Anyway, this war completely plunged the European powers into disputes, and the signing of the Utrecht Treaty also allowed the British to obtain the greatest benefits. The British acquired the strategic location of Gibraltar from Spain and the Spanish Americas. The colony monopolized the right to sell black slaves, acquired Newfoundland, Arcadia, and Hudson Bay and other North American territories from France, retained its maritime advantages and gradually increased its international status. This battle for succession to the throne became the last straw to crush the camel, and Spain, which even Gibraltar had lost, was completely reduced to a second-rate country in Europe. After poor Philip V came to power, the situation in Spain did not get any better in the first half of the 18th century. It can be said faithfully that Philip V is not a very good monarch, at least in his hands. Spain has not recovered. Even in 1724, Philip V, who was under great pressure, controversially passed the throne to his eldest son, Louis I, who was only 17 years old. It's a pity that Louis I had not proved whether he was a qualified or even an excellent monarch. He was infected with smallpox and was killed by smallpox. In desperation, Philip V, who had already abdicated, could only reseat the throne of the King of Spain again until his death. Although Philip V was suffering from severe manic depression, it did not improve the situation in Spain, and even broke Spain in 1739. Yes, the King Philip V was indeed the one that year. He tossed Spain into bankruptcy, but he couldn't hold back and gave birth to two good sons. After the death of Philip V, his son Fernando V became the third king of the Spanish Bourbon dynasty. Although the king has only reigned for 14 years, Spain began to recover in his hands. After Fernando V came to power, he took many powerful measures and began to slowly bring vitality to this declining country. Although Spain has declined, after all, this country has many colonies in the New World of America. Whether it is silver in Central America or gold in South America, or tobacco and sugar cane in the West Indies, they are constantly supplying the Spanish ship. The broken ship without a captain continued its life desperately. When Fernando V, the wise captain, began to completely control the ship that was about to sink in Spain, the ship began to miraculously recover with the help of the continuous transfer of property from the colony. Although Spain's sea power has been lost since the beginning of the 17th century, and despite unprecedented difficulties, the newly appointed Spanish ruler is still trying to revive the huge fleet that they used to be proud of. After Fernando V came to power, he began to try to build a new type of warship in order to beat the opponent in quality by the standards of the time. They did. Compared with the British battleships in the same period, the Spanish battleships had higher gun positions, wider beams, better stability, and more guns. They had a certain advantage in single-ship confrontation. It can be said that starting from Fernando V, Spain, the Royal Navy gradually embarked on the road to recovery. Later, after the death of Fernando V, his half-brother Carlos III became the new king of Spain. The equally ambitious Carlos III adheres to his brother's philosophy and vigorously develops Spain, so that this once glorious country continues to grow stronger. This is not just casual talk. With the launch of the first-class battleship Royal Philip with 114 guns www.wuxiaspa.com, the former invincible fleet began to have a backbone. Immediately afterwards, second-tier battleships with 80 guns such as the San Pedro Lightning were also launched, as well as other third-tier battleships. The addition of these two-tier and three-tier battleships brought the once invincible fleet to life again. And when the first-tier battleship San Carlos with 114 guns was launched last year, the Spanish Navy in the mid-18th century had once again owned the glory of the invincible fleet that was once invincible across the ocean. It is no exaggeration to say that even if the rise of Britain and France is so rapid, the two countries that have just experienced the 7 Years' War now dare not fight with the Spanish Royal Navy over the ocean. The Navy has restored its former glory. But the Spanish army, which was invincible in continental Europe, has always been in a half-dead condition. All of this, Major Felice knew that although he was a naval officer, he was also very eager for the Royal Spanish Army, which was invincible in continental Europe, to regain its former glory. In this way, both the navy and the army have become extremely powerful. Who else is the opponent of the Kingdom of Spain in the entire continent? But it's not so easy for the army to regain its glory. Now, on the New World side, there is finally an opportunity for the army to recover, and it is also an opportunity to bring the family's arms business to the next level. How could Felice Fernando give up? Chapter 409, Arms Dealer. The conditions reached by Stone Bear and Felice are very simple. 500 Ferguson rifles are exchanged for 500 war horses. If this condition is placed on Colonel Jones's side, it must be a condition called extortion. But Felice agreed very happily. If you don't agree, you can't do it. The big leader said very clearly that the 500 horses included the redemption money of Felice Fernando and the remaining 103 Spanish soldiers. Yes, now Felice and the others are equivalent to being captured by the Stone Bear. Well, it is not equivalent, but it is the case. According to the current rules on the European continent, captives can redeem themselves with money. Felice and these Spanish soldiers, although they have no money now, they can entrust others to redeem themselves. Felice is the first heir of the Fernando family after all, even if his father is still in the prime of spring and autumn. If nothing else, the title of Count Fernando will inevitably be inherited by Felice. He can't inherit if he doesn't. Now he is the only male in the entire Fernando family. Felice originally had 2 younger brothers, but unfortunately one died of a wind-cold infection not long after he was born. As for the other younger brother, he grew up to 7 years old, and as a result, a smallpox caused this younger brother to lose his life. Felice was already a second lieutenant officer in the Spanish Royal Navy. Now, the Fernando family is the only man left in the Fernando family. His sisters and younger sisters are obviously not eligible to inherit the title of Earl of Fernando. Therefore, in order to redeem Felice, the Fernando family must don't mind paying more ransom. After all, the Fernando family is really rich. A mere 500 horses are nothing in the eyes of the Fernando family. It's not an exaggeration to say that just the Fernando family's territory in the Viceroy district of New Spain, a colony established by Spain in 1535, governing New Spain, present-day Mexico, Central America and the Caribbean islands, etc., can be very easy. Provide so many war horses. Felice is destined to take over the entire Fernando family. And he has been training in the Spanish Royal Navy for so long, naturally you can see the excellence of this Ferguson rifle. For him, exchanging 500 war horses for these 500 second-hand rifles and the 104 Spanish soldiers, including himself, is definitely a very cost-effective business. This is also why Shi Xiong doesn't understand Felice's position in the Fernando family. If he knows, this guy alone can trade 500 horses. Spain is not Britain. Spain, which is struggling to rise for the second time, has a much higher acceptance of new things than Britain and France, especially this new rifle that can change the battlefield situation. As long as it is taken back, it will definitely be promoted in Spain soon. The Ferguson rifle cannot be promoted in the UK because a group of people with vested interests in the Brown Beth rifle are madly excluding the emergence of new rifles. But it's different in Spain. Ferguson rifles are promoted by the Fernando family, Spain's top 3 arms dealers, and they will definitely be promoted quickly in Spain. Spain and the United Kingdom do not deal with each other, and the Stone Bear who is familiar with history knows how terrible the empire will be if the sun does not set in the future. Although the sun never sets, the empire has lost North America, but people still have large colonies all over the world, including later generations of Canada. So, it is necessary to bleed the United States with the hands of the British, but it is also necessary to bleed the United Kingdom with the hands of the French and the Spanish. Stone Bear doesn't want the future of the Sunless Empire to cause damage similar to the Civil War to the new continent of North America. So, it is a long-term strategy to unite all those who can unite secretly to create trouble for the British. Anyway, Europe is very chaotic. Countries such as Britain, France, Spain, Prussia, Austria, and the Netherlands are fighting each other non-stop even in 9102, before the stone bear soul wears. Is it not easy for Britain to make a farce of Brexit? The ghost knows what this group of Europeans think. It is clear that the kings of several countries are relatives, or even close relatives, but this group of guys fight all day long. I want people to think like dogs. Brain. This is the case now, and the same will be true in the next war. Falling in love and killing each other is vividly reflected by these European countries. Since you like to play the game of loving and killing each other so much, Shi Xiong really doesn't mind putting some fuel between them. China's ancestors have long proposed the strategy of distant communication and close attack, and Shi Xiong will naturally not give up. Although Spain now occupies the entire west coast of the New World of North America, it is still far from the east coast. Therefore, for the stone bear, Spain currently belongs to the kind of country that can distant. And with the end of the 7 Years' War, Florida, which originally belonged to Spain, will also be taken over by the British. In fact, the British are now ready to take over Florida from the Spaniards. In other words, there is no direct conflict between Spain and Stone Bear now. Well, the battle that just ended can only be said to be a misunderstanding. It is estimated that General Carlos will become the backer of that battle. After all, so many soldiers have died, and there must be a backstop. This is why Major General Carlos is so anxious to get the bullets. I'm reading www.whocaninshoot.com because as long as he has such a powerful weapon, all his faults can be forgiven, and he can even be promoted again with the help of bullet throwing. It's a pity that General Carlos's subordinates have better luck, a more honorable status, and a wealthier family. The Grenadier Stone Bear is definitely not available to the Spaniards. This is a matter of principle, but the Ferguson rifle is different. Since the Ferguson rifle can be sold to the British, why can't it be sold to the Spaniards? Shi Xiong likes to do it the most. Anyway, as long as these European countries can continue to fight, Shi Xiong is willing to use any method. Even in order to make the weak Spanish army stronger faster, Shi Xiong also proposed the price of 2 rifles for 1 war horse. The price is already very low, that's a new gun. But it is a pity that Feliz is not a fool either. He declined Shi Xiong's proposal on the pretext of discussing with his family. The Stone Bear really wants to do this business, even if he exchanges 3 Ferguson rifles for a war horse Stone Bear. After all, even at this price, the Stone Bear is making a lot of money. No wonder there are so many people and so many countries in human history who are willing to be arms dealers. It is because the profits of arms sales are so tempting. These 2 transactions have inspired Shi Xiong to become an arms dealer. Chapter 410, Exposed Muscles. Feliz looked enviously as his fellow named Mendoza left this place accompanied by 2 tribal warriors. If possible, how much Feliz wished that person was himself. It's a pity that even Feliz himself knows that this is obviously impossible. At the very least, before the ransom, that is, the 500 war horses, I could not do without this place. Now that he had agreed to use 500 war horses as a ransom to redeem himself and his brothers, Feliz happily recommended Lieutenant Mendoza as the liaison officer between the Gaoshu tribe and General Carlos. To put it bluntly, Lieutenant Mendoza was the one who sent the letter. He sent the news here to Major General Carlos intact, and then Major General Carlos notified the manager of the Fernando family in the new Spanish territory, and finally sent the ransom. This process will take at least 3 months or even longer. After all, the Fernando family's territory is as far away as Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Since it is a letter, it must be delivered in the shortest time. But in this season, if you want to go out single-handedly, it is simply looking for death. If you insist on going out, the most likely thing is that the letter was not sent out and the person froze to death, or was devoured by hungry wild wolves in the wilderness. Therefore, in order to bolster the personal safety of Lieutenant Mendoza, Shi Xiong sent 2 soldiers to Lieutenant Mendoza to chase the bullock cart team to Jamestown to deliver fodder. Anyway, the Major General Carlos is currently at the seaside fortress north of Florida, to deliver the letter to the general. Lieutenant Mendoza must first cross the Blue Ridge from the east and enter the coastal area, then go south along the territory of the Cree. Regardless of the heavy snowfall on the Gaoshu tribe, as long as you cross the Blue Ridge and the Appalachian Mountains are blocked, the cold air from the north to the south will be weakened a lot, so even the area east of the Blue Ridge the snowfall will not be as big as the one on the Gaoshu tribe. Therefore, the biggest difficulty facing Lieutenant Mendoza is how to cross the Blue Ridge. It is obviously impossible for him to cross the Blue Ridge alone in this season. He doesn't recognize the road alone, not to mention the weather. Therefore, the ox cart team that has already set off for a day is Mendoza's best partner for crossing the Blue Ridge. Fortunately, the ox carts transporting forages moved slowly. Even if they had already set off for a day, Lieutenant Mendoza could quickly catch up with them under the of two tribal warriors. Speaking of this act of sending fodder, Shi Xiong thought about it later but didn't want to do it. But it won't work if you don't do this. Even though the ox cart team that sent the fodder can cross the Blue Ridge, as long as the speed is a little slower, it will definitely be able to bring back the 500 war horses. After all, ox carts can go, and the horse team will not have any problems. But Shi Xiong knew that the truth is not that simple. First of all, if Stone Bear wanted to take away these 500 war horses, it was obviously impossible for the Colonel Jones to let these horses go without a gun. After all, these 500 war horses are worth 5,000 pounds. According to the value of 1 pound equal to 450 grams of silver in this era, 5,000 pounds is 2.25 million grams of silver, calculated on the basis that 1 gram of silver in 9,102 is approximately equal to 0.33 pounds. These 5,000 pounds are worth 750,000 pounds in 9102! With the caution of Colonel Jones, he would definitely not let the people of the High Tree tribe take the horse away without seeing the gun. Similarly, Shi Xiong didn't worry about changing horses with his gun. Shi Xiong was worried about what happened if Colonel Jones turned his face. Therefore, the two agreed that Colonel Jones was responsible for sending the horse to the High Tree tribe, and then his men returned with 1,000 rifles. What Shi Xiong wants now is a war horse. Therefore, he would rather send fodder to Colonel Jones than to let Colonel Jones return the horses to the colonists who raised them. This is a very contradictory matter. How to choose depends on how Shi Xiong views this matter. Shi Xiong chose the most strenuous but surest way. I would rather raise these horses with grass than to throw them away. Just like the deal between Shi Xiong and Felisa, Shi Xiong also took great risks to make this deal. Felisa and his party already knew the specific location of the Gaoshu tribe. If they followed the Stone Bear's idea, these people would not be able to stay. Just like the Frenchman Major Armand and their prisoners, they were eventually killed by the Stone Bear. But the temptation of 500 horses is too great, and Shi Xiong felt that even if the Spaniards knew the specific location of the Gaoshu tribe, it would actually be fine. After all, in the beginning of spring, the Chicashas will be marched to the west. Once the Chicashas are resolved, then the west, south, and east of the Cherokee will be very safe. Even if the Spaniards want to touch in quietly, it is not impossible, but it may be small. A small group of troops may not be able to find out, but if a unit with less than 5,000 people wants to kill the Gaoshu tribe, it is simply idiotic. The expeditionary army is equipped with so many grenades. Do you think that the High Tree tribe as the base camp will not be equipped with this kind of weapon for defense? That is obviously impossible. But it is not an exaggeration to say that, despite the fact that the Gaoshu tribe does not show the mountains and the water, but this is definitely a giant hedgehog, who dares to come and find the fault, promise to stab him. However, it is obviously impossible for a large army to quietly touch the High Tree tribe in the hinterland of the Cherokee tribe. Besides, after the beginning of spring this year, Shi Xiong wants to solve more than just Chicasha. In terms of the current strength of the expeditionary force, as long as it is sent out once, all the Chicasha in the Mississippi will be solved. Even the Frenchman who was entrenched on both sides of the Mississippi River, Stone Bear, was ready to deal with it easily. Now the 55mm mortar developed by the 4 major alchemists has entered the experimental stage. The Gaoshu tribe can do grenadiers, so mortars are actually not difficult to do. If it weren't for material and processing problems, Shi Xiong would like to make heavy mortars with medium or even large calibers. However, this 55mm small caliber mortar is sufficient in this era. www.wuxiaspot.com. This small caliber mortar that uses non-flooded gunpowder as a propellant and has an effective range of more than 2,500 meters. The mortar is almost no different from the mortars used in the later World War II. In this era, mortars with an effective range of more than 2,500 meters are completely bug-like. Although it is difficult to make mortars and mortar shells, it doesn't need much. The expeditionary army only needs to be equipped with 10 or 20 doors, and then bring enough ammunition to make it a French military fortress. It only takes 1 or 2 volleys to win directly. Flowering bullets are also bug-like existence in this era. Therefore, Shi Xiong is not worried about taking the area near the middle reaches of the Mi River. As long as the west side is taken, the entire Gaoshu tribe will be completely worry-free. Because of Shi Xiong's certainty, he decided to complete the transaction with Feliza. It's time for the Gaoshu tribe to show its muscles. Chapter 411, Happy. Strangely enough, there were several heavy snowfalls after the winter last year, and the weather was extremely cold. And this cold continued until this year, which was the beginning of the month of 1767. However, after the heavy snowfall that Shi Xiong captured the Spaniards was over, the gods never dropped even a single piece of snow, as if the snow of the whole winter was finished by the previous heavy snowfalls. And this big sun is also very good. If you don't know, no one will think this is the coldest wolf month, January, of the year. Since the Oxcart team and the Mendoza lieutenant were sent away, the weather began to clear, and it was more than a month when it cleared. Come together every morning, and what you see is the rising sun. Before closing your eyes at night, the sky is either a bright moon or bright light bulb like stars. Later Shi Xiong once had trouble with a few colleagues. A few big masters in their 30s took advantage of the holiday and drove to the prairie to the north, and they wanted to see the stars for whatever they said. In later generations, in the industrially developed province of Shandong, let alone watching the stars, it would be nice to be able to see the moon. So after drinking that day, the elders all together wanted to experience the feeling of the sky full of stars when they were young. So the elders took a self-driving tour of the grassland. As a result, watching the stars on the grassland is really great. Looking at the stars without haze and light pollution, the stars in the sky are really like small light bulbs. P.S. This is not an exaggeration. Lao Mo has been to the Zemang grasslands. The stars at night are really great. Well, Lao Mo thinks that the most beautiful stars are on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. Some time ago, when Lao Mo went to the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, at night, wrap up in a down jacket and look at the stars brighter than a small light bulb can just make people fall in. This is actually a very sad thing. If you want to see the stars, you have to drive thousands of kilometers. What is it that is not sad? But it's better now, except for the full moon sky. At other times, as long as you look up at night, the starry sky is far more beautiful than any other place in the later life. This has to be said to be a kind of irony. What does sunny weather mean? There is no doubt that that means rise in temperature. Especially when the weather is fine for almost a month. What does that mean? It's simple. The temperature rises sharply and quickly. This is the Appalachian Mountains, not the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. If in the autumn and winter on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, it is commonplace to be sunny for a month, but here, sunny for a month, it is really abnormal. But God is so convulsed. Therefore, when a large group of horses and a caravan of cattle that consumed a small and a half of forage came to the Gaoshu tribe more than a month later, Shi Xiong only felt that God was too kind to him. Of course, the hard work is the expeditionary soldiers who escorted the fodder. But it doesn't matter, anyway, these fighters are mostly recruits, and it is quite necessary to exercise. The arrival of 500 war horses made the entire tribe seem to have started in an instant. All the young and old of the tribe ran out to see, where have they seen so many war horses? So every excitement is like that. The stables that have been built since the end of the Eastern expedition have finally come into use. Although these stables are simple, They can always keep out the wind and rain. War horses are precious possessions, and those war horses that Stone Bear worked so hard to get before have stables. Had it not been for the cement in the past 2 years, the tribe had begun to build a large number of brick houses, and those stables were even better than the wooden houses inhabited by the tribesmen of the Gaoshu tribe. During the Eastern expedition, Shi Xiong and Colonel Jones reached an agreement, so after returning, they organized the tribe to start building stables on a large scale. As a result, the stables were repaired, and a few heavy snowfalls blocked the way for the 500 war horses to reach the Gaoshu tribe. I thought I would have to wait until the beginning of the spring to get these 500 war horses back, but I didn't expect that God would start to be naughty again. Now anyway, these 500 war horses are finally available, and there are more than 700 horses that can be ridden in the tribe. When the 500 horses of the Spaniards come back, the Expeditionary Army will be able to form a cavalry regiment. This time Colonel Jones came with him. Although he is now the highest military commander of Jamestown, with the rise of Williamsburg and Richmond to the west, he, the highest military commander of Jamestown, began to become a little idle. In fact, as early as more than 60 years ago, Williamsburg had replaced Jamestown as the capital of the colony of Virginia. Had it not been for the strategic location of Jamestown, it was also the first British colony in the New World. Colonel Jones will not be stationed in Jamestown all the time. In fact, Jamestown is more like a large military camp, and Williamsburg, which is now ranked as the 4 major political, social, and economic centers of the 13 colonies alongside Philadelphia, Boston, and New York, is the center of Virginia. In fact, during the last Eastern expedition, the place where Colonel Jones led the troops and the expeditionary force met was not far from Williamsburg. Colonel Jones also wanted to replace General Henry as the supreme military commander of the British Army in Virginia, but the problem was that he could not do it for the time being. Therefore, Colonel Jones has already shifted the focus of his work to how to make money. It was for this reason that he became a greedy guy in the eyes of Major Hank and Lieutenant Ferguson. The transaction amount involved this time is really too big. Even Colonel Jones had to pay much attention to the 500 war horses, so he followed this transaction. As a result, the grand reception dinner was held again, and even Colonel Jones was very satisfied after the process of receiving Chief Junaruskal had gone down. In Shi Xiong's eyes, www.wuxiaspot.com food and drink are nothing. Colonel Jones sent these 500 war horses all the way back, no matter how he entertained them. If it is said that the delicious food is satisfactory to Colonel Jones, then since crossing the Big Bend on the pontoon and entering the jurisdiction of the High Tree tribe, what you have seen along the way is enough to shock Colonel Jones up. In any case, he could not have imagined that such an aboriginal tribe still existed in this remote and backward mountainous area. Where are the indigenous tribes? This is better than some small towns in China. Especially the flat roads are simply incredible. Shocked to shocked, what should be done is still to be done. 1,000 second-hand Ferguson rifles were delivered soon. Colonel Jones had 1,000 more powerful Ferguson rifles, and the Gaoshu tribe had 500 more excellent war horses. This is the joy of everyone. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 412, Armed to the Teeth. You have to ask which tribe the Expeditionary Army likes to fight. At least 5 soldiers out of 10 Expeditionary Army soldiers can say Chikashi tribe. And definitely not ambiguous. The Expeditionary Army was formed on the basis of 30 soldiers from the Gaoshu tribe and the Expedition Squad. At first, the Yuchi attacked the Zio tribe and killed the Zio tribe by surprise. At that time, this secluded tribe not only killed many tribesmen, but also their leader, Lei Ying, died in that attack. The most terrible thing is that Yu Kai also killed Shi Xiong's most beloved person, Bai Yun, which made Shi Xiong thunder angry, who moved his true feelings. Therefore, Shi Xiong not only shot and killed Yuchairan's then chief but also the leaders of the 7 tribes in that battle, but also the Yukai people who killed them single-handedly and scrambled. However, this killing did not calm Stone Bear's anger. He immediately formed an expedition team composed of 70 surviving warriors from the Zio tribe and 30 warriors from the Gaoshu tribe, relying on the mobility of the horses, sex and the powerful power of the Ferguson rifle and the conscientious cannon have slaughtered the court of Yukai. The expedition squad of 100 people expedition to the Yuchi people, but also cleanly slaughtered the court of the Yuchi people, and finally escaped smoothly with a record of 0 deaths under the pursuit of many Yuchi people, which directly played the prestigious name of the expedition squad. After a series of things, the chief of the Cherokee tribe Junaruska decided to form an expeditionary force, with the 30 fighters in the expedition team as the backbone, plus the 400 musketeers of the Gaoshu tribe, became the initial prototype of the expeditionary force. Later, at the instruction of Chief Junaruska, the leader of the Crooked Deer tribe, Kara Kriulu, selected 1,000 elite fighters from the Crooked Deer tribe to join the expeditionary force, forming this 1,400-strong expeditionary army. Later, because of the successful development of the grenadier, the Gaoshu tribe added 350 grenadiers. These grenadiers work in pairs and are responsible for the 170 grenadiers produced urgently. After 5 months of training, just as the army was about to set off on an expedition to the Cree, the tribal leader, one of the 4 guardian tribes of the Cherokee royal court, brought him again at the instruction of Chief Junaruska. The 300 elite guarding the tribe of the royal court eventually formed the expeditionary force of the Cree tribe consisting of 2,100 soldiers. After the victory of the Cree expedition, 1,600 expeditionary soldiers stayed in the Cree area to be responsible for local security and security maintenance, while the remaining 500 expeditionary soldiers followed the Stone Bear to the top of the Cree royal court back. Tribal. Chief Junaruska was overjoyed when he saw that more than 2,000 expeditionary troops had defeated the powerful Cree tribe in one go, and then sent 2,000 new recruits. Obviously, the chief who has tasted the sweetnesses to expand the scale of the expeditionary force. Shi Xiong led an expeditionary army composed of 500 expeditionary veterans and 2,000 recruits to fend the Pointons east again. As a result, they were also very smoothly arrested and returned to the top of the Pointons, completed a deal with Colonel Jones. In other words, about half of the soldiers in the current expeditionary army are soldiers of the Gaoshu tribe and the Crooked Deer tribe. These soldiers hate the Chickasaws the most, so when they say they want to fight the Chickasaws, these veterans are the most happy. The Crooked Deer tribe is located near the Great South Cha, and is one of the tribes closest to the Chickasaw. And because the Crooked Deer tribe is a large tribe, they are the main force against the Chickasaws. Over the years, many warriors of the Crooked Deer tribe died on the battlefield with the Chickasaws. Therefore, it is definitely not the Crooked Deer tribe who hates the Chickasaws the most. As for the Gaoshu tribe, the Shaggy Cattle tribe and the Pumpkin Bay tribe that were separated from the Gaoshu tribe were all destroyed in the hands of the Chickasaws. So the Gaoshu tribe's hatred of the Chickasaws is also great. Now the expeditionary army, oh no, the veterans of the Burst Bear Brigade are almost all fighters of the Gaoshu tribe and the Crooked Deer tribe. Therefore, when the Stone Bear announced that it was preparing to expedite the Chickasaws west, the entire Burst Bear Brigade really cheered one slice. Now the Burst Bear Brigade has a total of 4,100 people, plus 1,000 recruits just sent from the north. Well, these 1,000 recruits are new soldiers from Junaruska, a tribe from the central Cherokee area, selected elite soldiers. However, the western expedition is about to come. Even though these 1,000 fighters are all elite fighters of their respective tribes, they are full-fledged recruits in the Burst Bear Brigade. Ordinarily, it is best not to follow the Burst Bear Brigade for these 1,000 recruits, but Chief Junaruska's order is very clear, that is, these 1,000 recruits must be trained as soon as possible. Stone Bear can stand up to the chief's order not to send troops in winter. That's because the Stone Bear has enough confidence, and military dispatch in winter is also a taboo for soldiers. Therefore, Stone Bear can disobey the chief's orders without hesitation, and even take the chief. The arrogant nephew's legs were knocked off. However, Shi Xiong had to obey the command of Lord Chief. Although the recruits don't understand the every veteran grows up from the recruits. Therefore, Shi Xiong resolutely carried out this command of the chief. It's just that these 1,000 recruits split Shi Xiong into 2 parts. Among them, 500 recruits will act as forwards under the leadership of 100 veterans, that is, engineers dedicated to opening the way for large units. Their task is to open roads in the mountains and build bridges when encountering water under the premise of safety, so as to provide the best possible marching route for the large forces behind. This kind of task is actually quite dangerous, but Shi Xiong still insists on letting these recruits do it. After all, there are still 100 veterans with them, and there are more scouts in front of them, so their safety should still be guaranteed. As for the other 500 recruits, they naturally play the role of logistics soldiers. The original logistics soldier has now grown into a veteran. www.wuxiaspot.com. The logistics of this kind of work is naturally taken over by the recruits. In this way, the explosive bear brigade of 4,100 people has now increased to 5,100, which is about to approach the organization of a standard brigade in later generations. However, the 5,100-man Burst Bear Brigade really has not many soldiers with thermal weapons. In addition to the 600 grenadiers who have increased to 300 grenadiers, there are 1,000 musketeers. Among the 1,000 musketeers, 500 were armed with new-style blasting bear rifles, and the other 500 were armed with Ferguson rifles, which are the 500 Fergusons that the Stone Bear was going to exchange with the Spanish for 500 war horses, rifles. The remaining more than 300 explosive bear rifles were left in the Gaoshu tribe for defense. In other words, only 1,600 people in the entire Burst Bear Brigade use hot weapons, and the remaining 3,500 people still use cold weapons. It's just that the cold weapons in the hands of these 3,500 soldiers who use cold weapons are also quite good. Strong bows, steel knives, steel spears, throwing axes, and grenades necessary for everyone in the expeditionary army. This Western Expedition Bear Brigade is now armed to the teeth. Chapter 413, Westward. Now the security of the Cree in the south and the Powhatan in the east have been taken over by the soldiers sent by the Cherokee Royal Court, and all the soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade have returned. Therefore, this Western expedition can be regarded as a collective expedition of the Burst Bear Brigade. The reason why the Explosive Bear Brigade was allowed to expedition to the west is that this time the Western Expedition Stone Bear has a bigger purpose. The Chicashes are nothing more than a disease of scabies for the Burst Bear Brigade. Don't think the Chicashes can entangle with the Cherokees for so long, but it doesn't mean that the Cherokees can't control this tribe. Although there is a large swamp between the Chicasses and the Cherokees, the more important reason is that the Cherokees want the Chicasses to become more Western Missourians, Arkansas, Kentucky and Mississippi people. Buffer zone. Although the Indian tribes living on both sides of the middle reaches of the river are inferior to the Cherokee and Cree tribes in individual strength, it would still be terrifying if they were to unite. The most important thing is that most of these tribes have good relations with the French, and although they are also fighting each other, once there are outsiders, they will often unite. This is the most troublesome thing. Just like this time the combined forces of Kentucky and Missourians attacked the Chickasha tribe. P.S. The Missourians were written as Mississippi. Typographical errors, please forgive me. It directly reflects the relationship between these 4 tribes. At the beginning, the French built the Akron fortress in Akron, because they had good intentions with these 4 Indian tribes. If you look at the map, centering on Fort Akron, Kentucky is in the northeast, Missouri in the northwest, Arkansas in the southwest, and Mississippi in the south. In fact, the Kentucky people used to belong to the Iroquois League. The name Kentucky is the land stained with blood in Iroquois, because this area is located on the west side of Appalachia, guarding the north-south passage. It has been the place where the major Indian tribes fought against each other since ancient times. There have been many fierce battles here, so this area has this name. The Iroquois Alliance was a very powerful tribal alliance hundreds of years ago. It is also a tribe in the Iroquois Alliance that controls this area. This tribe has lived here for a long time. The name of this tribe in Iroquois is Kentucky. Although the scale of this tribe is not large, it is definitely a very fierce tribe. As for the Missouri, the name comes from the Missouri River. In Algonquin, the Missouri River is the Silt River, and the Indian tribes living in this area are collectively called Missourians. The name of the Arkansas in the southwest of Akron Fortress came from the powerful Sioux in the north. The powerful Sioux people live in the Big River, which is the upper reaches of the Mississippi River. In the eyes of the powerful Sioux, those tribes living in the lower reaches of the river are very docile, and the name Arkansas means south in the Sioux language, the tribe where the wind blows. In other words, in the eyes of the Sioux, Arkansas are weak chickens. As for the Mississippi people, it goes without saying that they came from the Mississippi River. These four tribes occupy the east and west banks of the middle reaches of the Mississippi, together with the Chickasaws who were later driven by the Cherokee to the vicinity of the Mississippi. There are a total of 5 tribes living in this large area. This time the Stone Bear plans to take down all these 5 tribes during the expedition. Even the 2 military fortresses built by the French near St. Louis and Memphis. As for Akron Fortress, Stone Bear certainly did not intend to let it go. He now knows that the Zio tribe was attacked because the Akron Fortress issued a reward order, and as a result, Uchiran acted on the Zio tribe because of greed. Therefore, Akron Fortress is the culprit of Xiong Zio's death. Although Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Chickasaw have a close relationship with the French, Shi Xiong is not afraid of these. Originally, Stone Bear had no intention of letting go of these 5 tribes this time. It would be even better if they could gather together. 300 grenadiers and 20 55mm mortars are now hungry. Because of the sudden improvement of the weather, even if there were a few consecutive light rains in February, the temperature did not drop much. On the contrary, because of these light rains, the snow and ice on the ground melted a lot. Therefore, when the end of February arrived, all 5,100 people from the Burst Bear Brigade were dispatched. If the ransom of Major Felisa and the 103 Spanish soldiers, that is, the 500 war horses, arrives, it doesn't matter. Anyway, there is no one in the tribe, so let the Spaniards wait and talk. Compared with this deal, it is more important to take the 5 tribes near the river to the west in advance. But this season, if you want to start from the High Tree tribe and reach the Chickasaw territory, you have to walk to the north of the swamp. That is, starting from the Gaoshu tribe, and then along the small road south of the Great South Fork. Around the Great South Fork, first arrived at the Crooked Deer tribe, after 2 days of repairing by the Crooked Deer tribe, and then along the channel of the Caney River to the west, crossing the hilly area north of the Everglades, can directly reach the boundary between the Chickasaws and the Cherokees, which is near Nashville, the later music capital. Compared with the waterway, this road is not only shorter, but also easier to walk. After all, this place is already regarded as the hinterland of the Cherokee tribe, and the exchanges between the various tribes have added a lot of roads in the Great South Fork. The so-called Great South Fork is the mountainous area north of Oak Ridge. In later generations, stone bears in this area are also relatively familiar. The Shaggy Cattle tribe, where this body was previously located, is located on the southern edge of the Great South Fork. Along the mountain path, the Burst Bear Brigade quickly bypassed the Great South Fork from the south side of the Great South Fork, and arrived near the later generations of Crosswell, where the Crooked Deer's tribe of Kalaraklaru was located. Kiaulaklilu is not currently in the Crooked Deer's tribe. He is currently in the White City Alliance and a group of tribal leaders in the White City Alliance to hand over the Cree and Powhatan tribes. Although he was able to catch up with www.wuxiasput.com this time on the Western Expedition, he is also estimated to be in the late stage of the Western Expedition, but it doesn't matter. Kiaulaklilu is now mainly engaged in internal affairs. Although he was the highest leader of the Red City Alliance before, he has now turned into a gorgeous turn and directly transformed into the high-level leader of the White City Alliance. It is estimated that after the end of the Western Expedition, this guy will become the supreme leader of the White City Alliance, responsible for peace. Who makes this guy not good at fighting, but there is really a way to engage in internal affairs. The Burst Bear Brigade repaired in the Crooked Deer's tribe for 2 days, and then went west along the valley of the Keene River. The forward troops met with water and bridged the mountains, which ensured the speed of the large rear troops. It took a few days for the explosive Bear Brigade to follow the path opened by the forward army to the next generation near Nashville. Later, this city was the second largest city and capital of Tennessee and the most famous country music capital in the United States. However, in this era, Nashville is just a small French residence, with only more than 100 in it. French colonists live here. Chapter 414. Manicanger. Later, Nashville is the famous country music capital in the United States and the world. Country music singers from the United States and the world are yearning to be trained and performed here. Well, the famous Big Mold in later generations made his debut here. Only at this time, in the early spring of 1767, this place was still a small settlement for European colonists that could not be smaller, and its scale was even the same as that of Jamestown back then. A wall of no more than 2.5 meters high surrounds this small residential area. Although this wall is built of stone, it is too short to even cover the buildings in the middle of the residential area. A more than 10-meter high flagpole was erected in the center of the settlement, with a Bourbon Irish flag hung on it. The French flag at this time was not the blue, white, and red three-color flags familiar to later generations. The current French kingdom is still under the rule of Louis XV, a long branch of the Bourbon dynasty, which is very serious. The French flag of this era is the Irish flag, which looks very complicated, not like a national flag, but more like a family flag of a family. But it doesn't matter anymore. The existence of this flag is enough to prove the ownership of this settlement. Near Nashville at this time, the influence of the British has not yet extended to this area. Here is the French world. Nashville will not be established by 2 British colonists in North America until 1779, 13 years later. After the 2 men established Nashville at that time, they were named after the hero Francis Nash during the War of Independence. It is estimated that in this era, no one except Stone Bear would have thought that this small residential area in front of them would develop into the second largest city in the entire state of Tennessee after Memphis. After more than 200 years, and even more so, the capital of the state. But at this time, this small French colonial residence was shivering under the gaze of the soldiers of the 5,000 Burst Bear Brigade. The Stone Bear could even see through the telescope that white flags were raised on the roofs of many residents in the settlement. The Mad Cow approached the Stone Bear and looked at the residents in front of him and said, "Boss, do you want to flatten this place? I've seen this place unpleasant for a long time. The Vasicou and Chickasha people inside are usually unpleasant. The collusion is very strong. If it weren't for these Vasicus, the Chickasha would not exchange so many things with fur. Our tribe has so many good things. But these guys just won't trade with us." Shi Xiong looked at the Mad Cow, who was constantly complaining, but did not speak. Obviously, Crazy Bull has a great resentment towards this small residence. Being able to transform the madman who has been promoted to the head of the 3rd Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade into this way shows that the French people living in this settlement did not do authentic things before. Before the outbreak of the War of Independence, in addition to Spain, the colonial strategy of European colonists in North America, such as France, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Prussia, was to plant, breed, and trade with the local Indian tribes. Needless to say about planting and breeding, the vast and fertile land of the New World is enough for European colonists who have immigrated to the New World and engaged in planting and breeding to obtain extremely rich returns. This kind of land that has not been cultivated for tens of millions of years is indeed too fertile. However, planting and breeding are mostly done by farmers who do not have much capital. Although they have a rich harvest on this land, they are still exploited by their respective countries. Therefore, farmers are farmers. Even European farmers are also targets of exploitation. The most powerful are those big nobles and rich people who hold a lot of money in their hands. They used the funds in their hands, the transportation between the 2 continents and the perfect sales channels to control more than 90% of the fur, gold, and gem transactions in the colonies of the New World. These great aristocrats and wealthy people in Europe have agents in every settlement, fortress and city in the New World. These agents work for these great aristocrats and wealthy people. Their task is to work with the local indigenous people, conduct a variety of transactions. When Stone Bear pretended to be the Chikeman to deceive the French in the Auckland fortress, he saw the various domineering agents of those French nobles in the Auckland fortress. Even the soldiers and officers stationed in the fortress cannot offend the agents of these great nobles. It is said that these big aristocrats and big rich people are looking for money. They should draw in the natives of the surrounding tribes, so that they can get more resources. Obviously, the French in this small settlement did not do this. They have completely fallen to the Chickasaw instead of supporting the Cherokee, and this has made it impossible for the fur of the Crooked Deer tribe to be traded at close range. No wonder Mad Cow is so resentful. Actually, I can't blame the French for this matter. This small settlement is located on the south bank of the Cumberland River, and the Cumberland River directly leads to the Ohio River, and the confluence is near the Akron Fortress. In other words, you can come here directly by boat from Fort Akron or even New Orleans. Oakland Fortress is a very important military fortress in this era. It is a strategically important military fortress built by the French on the Mi River and its tributaries. It can be said that Akron Fortress is the immediate superior of this settlement. The Chickasaws, who were driven to this area by the Cherokee, have made friends with the French and are staunch supporters of the French. I'm reading www. You can com and the Cherokee have a good relationship with the British. Britain and France have just finished a fight. It is absolutely normal that the French don't with the Cherokees. Joe Laklulu did not follow. Mad Cow is currently the highest-ranking military officer of the Crooked Deer's tribe, and he is qualified to speak directly to Stone Bear. Looking at the angry Mad Cow, Shi Xiong smiled and asked, "Why, do you really want to level this settlement?" "Well, I've seen this group of Vassaku displeased a long time ago. The leader was pressing and we couldn't move this settlement, otherwise I would have led the tribe's warriors to level this settlement." Shi Xiong smiled and nodded and said, "Mad Cow, then this settlement will be handed over to your 3rd Regiment. You are up to you in whatever postures you are willing to pose here, and this settlement is yours." "Really?" Mad Cow asked in surprise. "Boss, you mean I can kill all the Vassakus here? Is it okay?" Shi Xiong shrugged. "It's up to you," I said. "You will be responsible for the settlement." "Well, our mortar can be tested." If before, Shi Xiong might have let these French people go, but since he learned that Bayon's death was directly related to the French, he would never have this thought anymore. "Don't talk about the settlement in front of you, even if it is the Oakland Fortress at the end of the Cumberland River. Stone Bear has no plans to stay. If you want to calm the manic anger in Shi Xiong's heart, only the blood and life of the French can do it." Chapter 415, Saccade. Crazy Bull took the order excitedly, and then ran away even more excitedly. His 3rd Regiment was still far away from the Stone Bear. He had to go back and direct the 3rd Regiment to flatten the one in front of him, the Waxahachie settlement that has been gritted for a long time. Since the High Tree tribe had the Ferguson rifle, when Stone Bear was marching, except for terrain restrictions and when he needed to focus on firing, he seldom used the dense formation. The skirmish line was in the usual training of the Burst Bear Brigade. It has been deeply imprinted in the minds of the commanders, officers and soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade. Therefore, after more than 5,000 Burst Bear Brigade soldiers spread out in a skirmish line formation, the spread area is quite large. Even if the Mad Cow is riding a horse, it needs to run for a while. Through the single binoculars in his hand, the binoculars seized from the hand of Major Chrétien Armand, the Stone Bear can clearly see that the settlement on the opposite side has also changed. Although many white flags have been erected in the residential area, through the binoculars, the Stone Bear can clearly see that there are 2 dark spots on the wall facing this side. Needless to say, it must be a Frenchman. Artillery. However, there is no need to worry about this kind of artillery now. One is that the artillery of this era is so accurate that it can make people cry without tears, and the other is such a small residential area, which has at most 2 or 3 small caliber artillery, It's the kind of gun with the 4-pounder and a 6-pounder. Although the artillery of this era has a range of more than 1 kilometer, how powerful is this artillery that fires solid rounds? Coupled with the problem of accuracy, it is no exaggeration to say that the artillery of this era is used to bluff people. Of course, if the gunner's luck is good enough and the enemy's luck is bad enough, then perhaps a shell can be fired, and may be able to plow the enemy in a dense formation into an alley at a distance of 500 to 600 meters. But this happens mostly in imagination. In real actual combat, as long as the opponent has a little tactical awareness and avoids the direction of the muzzled, then this heavy and stupid artillery is really a display. Not to mention that the explosive Bear Brigade is still presenting a skirmish line, and ghosts are afraid of such artillery. When training soldiers, Shi Xiong used to deal with fortress guns or infantry guns. So when the 2 artillery appeared on the walls of the settlement, they were facing the direction of the gun's muzzle. The soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade simply avoided the commander's orders. The result of hard training on weekdays is undoubtedly revealed at this moment. Turning the binoculars slightly, Shi Xiong saw that the soldiers of the 3rd Regiment began to move, so Shi Xiong gave orders to the soldiers who were specially used to transmit orders. The soldiers immediately sounded the rhythmic horn. This rhythmic horn blasting Bear Brigade soldiers know that it is to maintain the original formation and keep pressure on the enemy. The meaning of is very simple: stand on the spot, and watch the brothers of the 3rd group go to clear the settlement. Most of the soldiers in the 3rd Regiment did not move. Only more than 100 people came forward at the skirmish line. Looking through the binoculars, Shi Xiong can clearly see that there are about 40 grenadiers among the more than 100 soldiers. They are in charge of 20 grenadiers, there are about 50 musketeers, and 7 or 8 rangers. At the end of the team, there are 3 separate fighters. These 3 fighters are responsible for the newly developed 55mm mortar. And these 3 fighters are the focus of Shi Xiong's attention. After all, although the entire Burst Bear Brigade has been equipped with 20 55mm mortars, this mortar is the first time this kind of real mortar has been used in actual combat. The French in the settlement obviously also saw the actions of the 100 soldiers of the 3rd Regiment. Then, more than 30 heads appeared on the fence. These people were all lying on the wall with their guns, watching this. 100 soldiers. The 3 soldiers in charge of mortars stopped shortly after running forward. One soldier untied the mortar on his back, and then quickly set up the barrel. The other 2 soldiers removed the ammunition boxes on their backs. A mortar is operated by 3 people. After the 2 soldiers with ammunition put down the ammunition, one becomes a dedicated ammunition hand, and the other becomes a loader. The soldier with the mortar on his back became the aimer. The 3 people formed the smallest mortar squad, and the most important thing in it was undoubtedly the aimer. As early as when the mortar was first developed and tested, Shi Xiong focused on cultivating sights, because the aiming hand is directly related to the accuracy of the mortar. If you are not accurate, even if you are given a 155 self-propelled artillery, it will be useless. But if it can hit the target, then with the effective range of the mortar and the power of the bomb, it is definitely a big killer. Later modern mortars all have a scope, and you can know the distance of the target by looking at the scope. But in this era, there is no sight or anything, so Shi Xiong can only use the simplest skipping method to train the sight. The so-called saccade method is actually the kind of quick measurement that you see in movies or TV with your arms straightened and thumbs up. This method of quickly measuring distance was also invented by later generations of soldiers. Experienced soldiers can quickly estimate the data they want, which is called a magical skill. When using this measurement method, first raise the right arm horizontally, with the thumb up vertically, and the right arm must be kept as vertical as possible to the body. Then close the left eye, rotate the waist, aim with the thumb or cover it. Measure the target. At this time, the right eye, thumb, and the measured target are on the same line. www.wuxiasput.com. At this time, close the right eye and open the left eye. At this time, the measured target will appear on the thumb, the left side, and there will be a horizontal distance from the thumb. At this time, it is necessary to estimate the size of the measured target. and then estimate the true distance of this lateral distance based on the size of the measured target, and then multiply this estimated distance by 10. Basically you can get the sighting hand standing the true distance of the location from the target. For example, after the sighting hand who is in charge of aiming continuously closes his left and right eyes, he sees a horizontal distance, and he estimates that the length of this stone wall is about 50 meters, and this horizontal distance, the length, is exactly the length of 2 stone walls. In other words, the actual length of the horizontal distance measured by the saccade method is about 100 meters, and then multiplied by 10. The final sighting hand's standing position should be about 1 kilometer away from the stone wall. In fact, the distance between the mortar squad and the stone wall is about 1 kilometer. Of course, the distance measured by the saccade method is only a rough data. To determine the real data, you need to test 1 or 2 cannonballs to determine the truest distance based on the shooting point. Seeing the musketeer and grenadier in front of him spread out in a skirmish line at a distance of more than 200 meters from him, and set up the grenadier, the aimer decisively began to adjust the angle of the muzzle. After he finished adjusting the angle, the loader carefully took a cannonball and went in from the muzzle. Chapter 416, First Shot. The shells of the mortar are similar in structure to the grenade used in the grenades, but they differ in caliber and charge. In order to make the mortar hit farther, all mortar shells used non-flooding gunpowder as the propellant. The warhead was not filled with dangerous bitterness, but continued to use black powder as explosives. However, the difference between the 55 mm mortar shell and the grenadier grenade is that the propellant of the mortar is integrated with the projectile body, in the propellant tube below the projectile. Instead of like the grenade of the grenade, the propellant and the warhead are separated. The propellant is separated from the warhead, so the production is naturally much simpler. But to combine the two, the production difficulty is increased many times. The 4 great alchemists developed mortars a long time ago, but the real mortar shells were developed more than a month ago. After all, the propellant and the warhead are combined together. The flash hider at the bottom of the propellant tube, the propellant, the explosive charge in the warhead, the detonator on the top of the warhead, and the percussion needle cap are all assembled in one projectile in addition to the 4 balanced tail fins at the rear. With the processing technology of this era, the difficulty of production can be imagined. So almost all the mortar shells used by the Burst Bear Brigade are handcrafted. Hundreds of craftsmen worked hard for more than a month, only then produced more than 300 qualified mortar shells. And these more than 300 artillery shells, just in the previous test and training saccade method used 100. In other words, this time the Burst Bear Brigade brought out all the 20 55 mm mortars, but they really need to be used. One mortar can fire 10 rounds at most. But even 10 shells are definitely invincible in this era. The charge of the warhead of the 55 mm mortar shell is twice as large as the charge of the grenade used by the grenades, reaching 400 grams. 400 grams of black powder plus a handful of iron sand. Its explosive power is extremely terrifying. At the time of the experiment, if such a mortar bomb exploded on flat ground, its killing radius could reach 12 meters. This kind of power is twice as powerful as the killing power of a bullet toss. The most important thing is that the longest effective range of the 55 mm Grenadier is not only 600 or 700 meters, but can reach 2,600 meters. What does that mean? It's very simple. If you give the mortar enough ammunition. In principle, a 55 mm mortar can defeat the entire Grenadier army. You can't hit people with the bullets, and no matter how large the number is, it will be useless. But other mortars can rely on 4 times the effective range. Flying a kite can walk a Grenadier unit with a range of only 600 to 700 meters. It is not an exaggeration to say that this 55 mm mortar produced by Shi Xiong with the 4 great alchemists is definitely the top military level of this era. This mortar shell, which is a collection of more than 200 years of memory and experience of Stone Bear, and months of hard work by the 4 great alchemists, was passed into the barrel by the loader from the muzzled, and the loader immediately flashed aside, and then squatted down with his back to the muzzled, his head drooping. This posture can protect the eardrum of the loader and prevent the eardrum from being damaged by the burst of sound during launch. The aiming hand and the ammunition hand are also squatting in the same posture, but they have to hold the mortar bracket to prevent the muzzle from jumping at the moment of firing. The shell fell down the barrel. When the flash cap at the bottom of the propellant tube hits the bulge at the bottom of the barrel, the flash cap was instantly activated, and then the unflooded gunpowder in the propellant tube was also ignited. Accompanied by a low burst of sound, a flame rushed out of the muzzle along with the cannonball. The next moment, there was a strange whistling sound in the sky. That's the screaming noise of a mortar shell that cuts through the air. Most of the soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade have heard this sound, and have heard it more than once, so most of the soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade looked up at the black spot that crossed the sky, looking forward to the explosion. The sound sounded. But the French people in the residential area were confused. They couldn't think of why such a sound appeared in the clear sky. Well, let's not say that although this voice sounds a bit sharp, it sounds nice. But this is the sound that sounds good to French people, but it is the out-and-out roar of death. In just over 3 seconds, this screaming sound crossed the sky over 1,000 meters long, and then under everyone's gaze, this mortar shell that was used in actual combat for the first time in the world, it exploded less than 20 meters away from the stone wall. After a burst of dazzling light flashed, there was a huge explosion, followed by black clouds and mist rising up. Although the impact point of the first shot in actual combat is still more than 20 meters away from the stone wall, the stone bear who has been watching with the telescope nodded with satisfaction. The first time I fired a cannon in actual combat, it was able to shoot such a small arrow at a distance of 1,000 meters, which shows that the normal training of the aimer is extremely effective. What made Shi Xiong smiled was that although the impact point was still more than 20 meters away from the stone wall, a Frenchman standing on the stone wall was still unlucky enough to be hit by a piece of flying cannonball fragment. Bingo! So this unlucky ghost planted his head from the stone wall. Although the theoretical damage radius of a 55 mm mortar shell is 12 meters, the warhead is loaded with 400 grams of black powder after all, let alone a large amount of iron sand, which is very insidious by the stone bear. 400 grams of black powder explodes with great power. www.wuxiaspa.com. Some fragments or iron sand can often fly dozens of meters away. It is estimated that this hapless man was hit by fragments at a distance of 20 meters. If the fragments are small and the limbs are okay, the greatest possibility is direct amputation. But if the fragments are a little bigger, and they still hit the torso or head, then this hapless one will only die. Just kidding, this is a cannonball, not a lead shot from a musket. When I was fighting the Cree in the Pointon before, after a grenade fired with a grenadier exploded, if a piece of matchbox-sized fragments hit the target's neck, it would directly cut off the head. Ishikama didn't bother to worry about where the hapless guy was shot, because with the explosion, the French on the stone wall suddenly rioted. The 30 or so Frenchmen who had just exposed their heads on the stone wall immediately disappeared. Then, the two defensive artillery also began to move. It seems that the French realized that something was wrong, and they wanted to use artillery to carry out the action, fight back. Is this possible? On one side are stupid artillery, and on the other side are smart mortars. How can this be compared? Just when the French artillery moved a little bit, the sighting hand had once again completed a new calculation. Using a precious shell to locate is not a joke. If the second shell fails to find the target, Mad Bull can throw this sight directly onto the stone wall as a shell. So, after only 10 seconds, the sharp whistling sound cut through the sky again. Chapter 417, Rush to Kill. The sighting hand did not disappoint the stone bear, nor did it disappoint the Mad Bull. Nor did it disappoint the brothers of the more than 5,000 Blast Bear Brigade. The speed of mortar shells is not fast, and even the speed of sound cannot break through. This is much worse than the speed of rifle bullets and artillery shells. Therefore, people with slightly better eyes can almost see the black spot flying in a parabolic trajectory in the sky. The shell, which entrusted the hope of more than 5,000 Burst Bear Brigade soldiers, traversed a nearly perfect parabolic trajectory in the sky, and then screamed into the stone wall of the French settlement. Huge explosions, firelight and thick smoke suddenly appeared behind the stone wall, followed by faintly audible screams. There is no doubt that although this shell did not directly hit the two artillery pieces, it definitely caused a huge loss to the French behind the stone wall. The sighter was obviously not satisfied with the shell, so he leaned over and started to adjust the height of the bipod supporting the barrel, and then just over 10 seconds later, another screaming sound resounded through the world again. This shell hit the two artillery pieces almost immediately, and the power of the 400 grams of black powder burst immediately appeared in front of everyone. The two artillery pieces weighing hundreds of kilograms were like wooden stakes hit by a mad buffalo. They suddenly rolled and fell from the top of the wall. The 2.5-meter high stone wall was also huge. The power of the explosion directly blasted a gap about 3 meters wide. Through this gap, the soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade standing in front can almost see the situation in this settlement. The settlement has become a mess. Dozens of figures are running around in a panic. The screams and shouts are faintly audible, and the smoke and firelight make it look miserable. Obviously, the second and third cannonballs caused huge damage to this small settlement. If all the members of the 3rd Regiment charge at this time, it is estimated that only one charge can completely wipe this small settlement on the surface of the earth. But Crazy Bull obviously inherited the battle philosophy of Lord Guardian Shi Xiong, that is, as long as conditions permit, he would rather consume precious ammunition than risk his life. Stone Bear often instills this idea in the soldiers and officers of the Burst Bear Brigade, that human life is priceless, and nothing is more valuable than human life, even precious mortar shells or war horses. So on the battlefield, if you can consume and kill the enemy with ammunition, you should never use the lives of our soldiers to fill it. With the end of the battle between the southern expeditions of the Cree and the eastern expedition of the Point, the concept of the supreme commander of the Burst Bear Brigade has been deeply imprinted in the bones of the soldiers and officers of the Burst Bear Brigade. Therefore, even those who are as violent as the Mad Cow, after seeing the effect of the mortar bombing, are very good. They start to command the semaphore messenger around him to give new instructions. The first 3 shells had destroyed the 2 most threatening artillery pieces of the French, so now the 3rd Regiment can conduct various actual combat tests on the mortars on this small settlement. Didn't the first 3 shells fire at a distance of 1 kilometer? Well, let's retreat now. Let this mortar squad retreat 500 meters, and fire 3 more shells at a distance of 1,500 meters. Of course, at this distance, neither the Stone Bear nor the Mad Cow require the mortar squad to be able to directly smash the shells onto the head of the artillery as accurately as before. Within a range of 1,500 meters, this mortar, as long as the artillery squad can accurately smash the cannonballs into the French settlements, it is done. This mortar squad did not disappoint everyone. After a test shot at a distance of 1,500 meters, the last 2 shells all entered the settlement accurately and ignited again in the French settlement. 2 huge torches. Then the mortar squad continued to retreat, retreating to a distance of 2 kilometers and firing again. However, because there are already 4 huge torches in the settlement at this time, even if they are far away, the aimer can only vaguely see the location of the settlement. But there are these 4 huge torches directly positioning, so at a distance of 2 kilometers, the mortar squad directly shot all 3 shells into the settlement. With the explosion of these 3 shells, this small settlement has completely turned into a huge torch. A few kilometers away you can see black smoke billowing. The mortar squad clearly understood what their boss wanted to do, so when the order was given, they immediately continued to retreat 500 meters and reached a position of 2,500 meters to continue shooting. But obviously, the hit rate at this distance was significantly lower. 5 shells were fired at this position, and only 3 shells were able to penetrate the settlement. The remaining 2 shells were missed. But this result is already pretty good. We must know that when this 55mm mortar, also known as the 55 mortar for short, was tested, The limit effective range was about 2,600 meters. Although after adjusting the 55 mortar to the maximum range angle, the firing distance will increase a lot, but that kind of shooting is almost beyond doubt, because the accuracy of the bullet point cannot be guaranteed. Under the premise of ensuring shooting accuracy, the maximum effective range of the 55 mortar is about 2,600 meters. This mortar squad can do 5th and 3rd at a distance of 2,500 meters. www.wuxiaspot.com. This is actually quite good. After all, although the other two shells did not directly hit the target, they were both very close to the target. They can be regarded as near misses on land. After shooting 14 rounds from 4 different distances, the mortar squad was summoned by the flag, and the other 2 mortars of the 3rd Regiment appeared. The Burst Bear Brigade is now equipped with only 20 55 mortars. The 5 regiments of the Burst Bear Brigade are equipped with 3 for each regiment, while 5 are deployed in the Grenadier Unit directly under the jurisdiction of the Stone Bear. Despite the great power of mortars, at this time, the decisive role on the battlefield is the large-scale Grenadier. The 2 mortar squads of the 3rd Regiment are going to carry out saturation bombing at a distance of about 600 meters. In fact, although 4 of the 14 shells fired by the 1st mortar squad did not hit the settlement, the other 9 shells all hit the French settlement. With a 12-meter kill radius of the 55 mortar shell, these 9 shells have almost blown up this settlement with a diameter of only 50 meters. But Crazy Bull is obviously not satisfied with this. The soldiers of the 3rd Regiment have surrounded the settlement in groups. The 2 mortars behind the soldiers fired 5 shots at a rapid speed, and suddenly the settlement was completely changed of flames. As long as they escaped from the settlement, they were shot and killed one by the soldiers of the 3rd Regiment, either with a musket or a strong bow. Rush to kill is the decision made by the Mad Cow. Chapter 418. Pawn Division 2. After watching the tide-like soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade pass over this settlement that has completely turned into a ruin, Stone Bear knows that history has undergone a small change here. Nashville, the capital and 2nd largest city of Tennessee, was also the oldest city in the state. It was the Americans who took over this small settlement during the War of Independence and developed it based on this settlement. Now, this French settlement has been completely razed to rubble. The ghost knows whether Nashville will exist in the future. Anyway, Stone Bear knows that in his lifetime, he might build a city here. After all, this is the flattest large area around, and it's on the bank of the Cumberland River. Whether it's traffic or water transportation or it is planting and breeding, which is much better than the mountainous areas in the east. But if the city is built, it will definitely not be called Nashville again. This is the territory of Indians, so the name of the city can only be a name full of Indian colors. As for the name, Shi Xiong won't think about it now. For the Burst Bear Brigade, this small settlement does not even have the qualifications to become an obstacle. But the removal of this settlement is of great significance. This is actually the outermost layer of the Chicashan umbrella. Flattening this settlement means that the Burst Bear Brigade has officially entered the Chicasha territory, and it also means declaring war on the French. The native Indian stone bears who live on both sides of the middle reaches of the Mi River are not worried, and for France at this time, the stone bears are also not worried. Although France is very powerful now, the emperor is far away from the mountains, and no matter how powerful the French are, it is beyond the reach of this place. The most important thing is that in about 7 more years, the War of Independence will start on this land. If the French still have the energy to pay attention to this place, then Shi Xiong will really convince them. So Ashikaga is not worried about the French. As for those tribes, with the equipment and training of the Burst Bear Brigade, it is only a matter of time before they can be conquered. Bursting Bear Brigade killed 4 Chicasha tribes in succession within 2 days after unplugging this settlement. It is also ridiculous. When the Chicashas of these tribes saw the wolves and tigers of the Bear Brigade warriors, all of them did not believe it was true. There are even many Chicashas who knelt down and prayed when the grenade exploded. In the eyes of this group of Chicashas, this kind of people can make a huge noise and fire, and also a weapon that can tear people into pieces directly, is basically the wrath of the gods from heaven. The tribe must have angered the gods in the sky, otherwise, how could the gods give such a powerful punishment? Therefore, only praying for forgiveness of the gods can avoid the death of the people. Burst Bear Brigade destroyed the 4 Chickasaw tribes with a destructive momentum, and these 4 tribes were all large tribes with a population of about 1,000 people. After all, this place is at the forefront. The tribes here are all tribes with elite soldiers. In fact, the Littich tribe, led by the whistle snake that was killed by the stone bear, is located in an area not far from this area. The Burst Bear Brigade did not kill all the Chickasaws of these 4 tribes. Almost all the women and children became the trophies of the Burst Bear Brigade fighters, and the strong adult warriors were basically killed. The Chickasaws are different from the Cree and the Powhatans. The Chickasaws have too much blood from the Cherokees on their hands. Even if others can't bear to kill these Chickasaws, they can't get past the stone bear this level. 300 years of enmity has made the 2 tribes immortal. Therefore, even if these adult fighters are defeated, there is still a great possibility that they will rebel again. Instead of leaving these adult soldiers to waste food, it is better to kill them as soon as possible. The most important thing is that Shi Xiong's family died in the hands of the Chickasaws, and even the former owner of this body actually died in the hands of the Chickasaws. Stone Bear is not a fuel-efficient lamp, nor is it a virgin bitch. He has always believed in a tooth for a tooth, to report grievances directly. Since the Chickasaws are their own enemies, kill them without mercy. Of course, those women and children cannot be killed. These women and children are Cherokee spoils and wealth. It's a shame to kill. The 4,000-member tribes added more than 2,000 women and children to the Burst Bear Brigade, so Stone Bear had to pause his advancement, and while collecting the food accumulated by these 4 tribes, he sent people back to the Crooked Deer tribe to inform the Crooked Deer tribe to send people come to receive these women and children. The Explosive Bear Brigade came out to fight, so naturally it is impossible to bring so many women and children on the march. Even if the soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade wanted to do this, food was not allowed. Therefore, it is the most correct for these women and children to temporarily pull back. When the Explosive Bear Brigade ends the Western expedition, these trophies will be collected properly. After the Crooked Deer tribe sent a group of soldiers to receive these women and children, the Burst Bear Brigade divided into 2 troops and began to march west and north. The later Nashville is located in the middle of Tennessee. Starting from here, marching north and west along the Cumberland River Valley, you can directly reach the Oaklawn Fortress, and if you march directly westward along the Harpers River Valley, you can enter the hinterland of the Chickasaw tribe. This large area from Nashville to the later Memphis is the main gathering place of the Chickasaw tribe. There are not only the Reincarnated tribe, the second largest tribe of the Chickasaw tribe, but also the king of the Chickasaw tribe, the courtyard, and the 4 guardian tribes. It can be said that more than 70% of Chickasaw people live in this area of more than 10,000 square kilometers. If you want to move the Chickasaws, www.wuxiaspot.com. It will inevitably alarm the Oaklawn Fortress in the north, and if you want to move the Oaklawn Fortress, it will inevitably alarm the Chickasaws in the south. And the partial Stone Bear not only wants to kill the Chickasaw, but also wants to unplug the Oaklawn Fortress. Both of these, the Stone Bear does not want to let go. It is for this reason that Shi Xiong decided to split his arms. Northroot Stone Bear personally led the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade, that is, Stone Bear's immediate relatives, to attack the Oaklawn Fortress in the north. Day, who used to be the logistics supervisor of the expeditionary force and now the commander of the 4th Regiment, is assisted by the 3rd Regiment Mad Cow. Although the Northroot Army has only 1 regiment with more than 1,000 soldiers, its strength is extremely strong. After all, the 1st Regiment was directly under Stone Bear's pro-army, almost all veterans, and most of them were soldiers from the Gaoshu tribe. The main task of the Northern Army is to advance along the Cumberland River Valley and finally arrive at Fort Oaklawn, then use mortars to bombard Fort Oaklawn from a long distance, kill the most threatening fort cannon, and then destroy Fort Oaklawn with bullet-throwing cannons. Pier and bombing of Auckland Fortress at close range. As long as the fort cannons on the wall of the Auckland Fortress are killed, with the power of the grenadier, the French military fortress can be taken at the least cost, thereby cutting off the middle reaches of the Mi River and the Ohio River. The Bighorn Sheep led the remaining 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th Regiments of the 1st Bear Brigade and marched westward along the Halps River, called the Westward Army. The heads of the 4 regiments of the 1st Bear Brigade assist the Bighorn Sheep. The main task of the Westward Army is to destroy the Chickasaws and take down the French military fortress near Memphis. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 419, Indestructible or Paper. What Shi Xiong hates most is not the Chickasaws. The soul comes from him more than 200 years later. In fact, his hatred for the Chickasaws is not so great. Most of his hatred for the Chickasaws comes from the memory of the owner before this body. As his soul took over this body for more and more time, the memory that was originally a silly head has been completely integrated into his own memory, so Shi Xiong can now look at this hatred very lightly. Not to mention that Baiyun and Green Sky Lark were Chickasaws before, so Stone Bear's hatred for Chickasaws is not as deep as it seems on the surface. On the contrary, Shi Xiong is really hateful for the French now. Although Baiyun died in the hands of Yukai, if it were not for the French to provoke him, he would not dare to cross the Great Smoky Mountain and attack the Zio tribe if he killed Yukai. So, the real culprits are those damned French. Don't look at Stone Bear now, and Green Sky Lark have formed a family, and Stone Bear will be a father in a few months. But Shi Xiong is really a very emotional person, and such people often hold grudges. Baiyun still has Lei Ying's hatred. How could Shi Xiong forget it? Therefore, during the Western expedition, when the first French settlement was encountered before, Stone Xiong would let the mad cow directly flatten the settlement. Now it's time to divide the troops again. Naturally, the Stone Bear has to go to the Auckland Fortress in the north, unplug this Frenchman's most important military fortress on the Ohio River, and at the same time use the location of the Auckland Fortress to completely cut off the Mi River transportation route. As for whether the defense of Auckland Fortress can be broken, Stone Bear has never doubted this. First of all, the Stone Bear has been to the fortress of Auckland. In that cold winter 2 years ago, Major Curtien Armand, the supreme commander of the French army stationed in the fortress of Auckland, moved his eyes and got in touch with the Reddick tribe, the second largest tribe of the Chickasaw tribe. 100 French musketeers and 200 Reddick tribe fighters, under the leadership of Major Armand and the leader of the Reddick tribe, Whistle Snake, rode 4 inland armed transport ships upstream along the Tennessee River, going to sneak attack on the Gaoshu tribe. Originally, the actions of these guys went smoothly, but what they didn't know was that there was a guy in the Gaoshu tribe whose soul came from more than 200 years later. The most important thing is that this guy also taught the soldiers of the Gaoshu tribe how to tame the bison. Originally tamed bison was for farming, but unexpectedly, these tamed bison became the biggest killer. These 300 French Chickasaw coalition forces were trampled on by dozens of bisons burning on their buttocks, and the remaining French were also caught by Stone Bears. Because the Major Armand did not die under the hooves of the cow, this gave Stone Bear the opportunity to deceive and blackmail the French. Later, Shi Xiong took these Frenchmen and took 4 armed inland river transport ships seized from the French to the Auckland Fortress. Not only did they defrauded a large amount of food, cloth and other materials from this fortress, but also, by the way, I figured out the defense situation of this fortress. In fact, the location chosen by the French is really good. This fortress is located on a hill of 30 to 40 meters to the west of the confluence of the Tennessee River and the Ohio River. With a flat land all around, this fortress it can be said to be condescending, easy to defend and difficult to attack. Moreover, to the north of this fortress is the wide Ohio River, and to the east is the Tennessee River that merges with the Cumberland River. These two big rivers are like two natural moats, protecting the north and east of the fortress. Not to mention the Ohio River in the north. The width of the river here is more than 2 kilometers. Although the Tennessee River to the east is not as wide as the Ohio River, it is more than 500 meters wide. In this era, when the effective range of artillery is generally only a few hundred meters, if an enemy wants to attack from these two directions, it is almost impossible. On the west and south of the hill where the fortress is located, there are large swamps. There are only 1 or 2 paths explored with human lives in the swamp, and only a few people can enter and leave at the same time. This also eliminates the possibility of large-scale enemy forces attacking from these two directions. It is worthy of being a military fortress carefully built by the French. This kind of terrain alone is enough to ensure that this fortress is foolproof in this era. The defense of the fortress itself is also very good. The fortress was built on the top of this small hill almost 40 meters high. The area of the fortress is small, only about 10 acres of land. It is circular and about 100 meters in diameter. The wall of the fortress is not too high, only over 3 meters high, but the wall is very thick. The most important thing is that on the 4 special fortresses built on the walls of the fortress, there are 4 24-pound fortress guns. Although this fortress cannon cannot fire blooming shells, this 24-pound fortress cannon has a maximum range of nearly 3 kilometers. Although the projectiles fired are not much larger than a big apple, and the effective range is only a few hundred meters, but if this shell is hit, even a battleship sailing on the sea can make a hole. As for the small armed transport ship that can only sail in the inland river, if it is hit by 4 such artillery shells at the same time, there will be only one result of destruction. These 4 fortress cannons are scattered on the north and east walls, because there are marshes to the south and west. If the enemy wants to attack, they can only attack from the river. Therefore, the 4 most powerful fortress cannons are specially protect the river. In addition, www.wuxiaspa.com. In addition to these 4 fortress cannons, there are more than a dozen small-caliber infantry cannons on the fortress wall. At least the last time the Stone Bear entered the Akron fortress, more than a dozen were seen. A 4-pounder and a 6-pounder. Although the 4 Valyrian fortress guns on the wall, the diameter of the projectiles fired by them is only a circle larger than that of a big apple, and the cannonballs activated with black powder are far inferior in power. Compared with the 20mm machine guns with the smallest caliber in later generations, in this era, this fortress gun plus the artillery group composed of those small caliber guns is enough to make most of the enemies intimidated. Generally speaking, the defense of this fortress is very good. The excellent terrain plus the thick walls, there are so many artillery on the walls, and the musketeers who are all soldiers inside. In this era, this kind of defense is enough to easily resist the attack of thousands of people. But Shi Xiong is going to move this fortress this time. If it is someone else, after seeing the almost indestructible defense of Akron Fortress, it is estimated that they will turn around very neatly and leave. Even Shi Xiong 2 years ago would have such thoughts. But after the development of the 55 mortar, the defense of Akron Fortress looked almost like paper in the eyes of Stone Bear. Chapter 420. Mortar Positions and Ambush Circles. In this large area where the Tennessee River and the Ohio River meet, except for a few scattered hills, the rest of the area is very flat. Of course, this flatness does not mean that you can't trust the horse. After all, this is the confluence of 2 big rivers. Although it is flat, it is mostly swamp and woodland. Just like the large swamps to the south and west of Fort Akron are the natural barriers of Fort Akron, even better than the Ohio River and the Tennessee River that act as a moat. It is naturally impossible for the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade to attack from those 2 directions. Attacking from the swamp in this spring season is basically a death-seeking behavior. This huge swamp is enough to swallow tens of thousands of people in. There are more than 1,000 people in the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade, which is not enough to see in front of this swamp. The Ohio River to the north was too wide to be suitable for attack, so Shi Xiong set the direction of attack to the east of the fortress. To the east of Akron Fortress is the Tennessee River with a river surface of more than 500 meters. Although the river surface is not wide, the current is very turbulent. Without a large enough boat, it is impossible to forcibly cross the river. However, Stone Bear did not intend to forcibly cross the Tennessee River to attack Akron Fortress, and it would be no different from seeking death, among other things. Just the two fortress cannons facing this side on the Akron Fortress and the small caliber infantry cannons are an insurmountable sky. But there is no way for others. But Shi Xiong has full confidence. Because the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade has as many as 1555 mortars. That's right, the entire Burst Bear Brigade was equipped with 2055 mortars. This time the division of forces, Shi Xiong brought 15 mortars. It's not that the Stone Bear does not take care of the Bighorn Sheep, it is the Westward Army who fought along the way, and only the weak Chickasaws have to face. The 55 mortar is not very useful when dealing with such weak chickens. A grenadier and a musket are enough. The 555 mortars are only reserved for handling accidents. The Northern Army wanted to attack the fortress of Akron, so it needed more 55 mortars. Now the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade has more than 1,000 people, and these soldiers are all veterans. In addition to calling 1555 mortars, the 1st Regiment was also equipped with 50 grenadiers. In addition, there are 200 cavalry equipped with blasting bear rifles, 300 infantry equipped with blasting bear rifles, 200 guerrillas and 200 logistic and scout soldiers. The 1st Regiment's armed forces are very powerful, and it is no match for the entire Burst Bear Brigade. This time he was going to attack Akron Fortress, and Stone Bear was counting on the 1555 mortars. On the east bank of the Tennessee River, there are also several small hills that are 20 to 30 meters high. Now on the top of 3 of these hills, they have become 55 mortar positions. The straight line distance from Fort Akron to the west bank of the Tennessee River is no more than 400 meters, and the straight line distance from these 3 hills to the east bank of the Tennessee River is no more than 300 meters, plus the width of the Tennessee River. The straight line distance between the hills and Akron Fortress is about 1,200 meters. The distance of 1,200 meters is the best shooting distance for the 55 mortar. At this distance, even the 2 24-pound fortress guns on the walls of Akron Fortress facing the east could not play any role. Although this fortress gun has a range of 3,000 meters, its effective range is even less than 500 meters. At a distance of 1,300 meters, the gunners of the fortress cannons can only pray for God's love. Otherwise, at such a distance, the cannonballs fired by the fortress cannons are enough to go tens or even hundreds of meters. Yes, the artillery of this era is of this kind of virtue. Don't look at the range of the artillery as high as 3,000 meters, but the effective range is only a few hundred meters, and even a few hundred meters is a big deal. Otherwise, the sailing battleships of this era will not pull closer to 200 meters before firing. Although this 24-pound fortress gun is placed on a turret, its stability is much better than that of a sail battleship gun, but its true effective range is not much stronger, and it is close enough to make you cry without tears. For the artillery of this era, it's not that your one shot misses and the next shot can be guaranteed to hit by adjusting the muzzle direction. The artillery of this era fired sub-caliber shells, and the diameter of the shells was smaller than the caliber of the barrel. So when the cannonball is fired by black powder, because there is a large gap between the cannonball and the barrel, the cannonball will advance in the barrel in a jumping manner. A cannonball advancing in this way, the ghost knows which direction the cannonball is aimed at when it exits the chamber. Even if the gun pops out of the bore by 1 millimeter, the error caused by 1 kilometer away does not know how many meters there are. These 3 hills are 1,200 meters away from the fortress of Akron. Therefore, the 1555 mortars of the 1st Regiment can appear on those 3 hills. Even in France, which is fortified by Akron, it doesn't matter if people see it. Shi Xiong and the others just stood here and let the artillery hit them, and they couldn't hit them either. The most important thing is that with the rate of fire of the mortar, it is estimated that the fortress guns in the fortress of Akron need at least 1 minute to load a shell, and at most, there is only a chance to fire 1 shell. There are 3 small hills, and 555 mortars are arranged on each hill, 10 of which are dedicated to bombing the fortress of Akron. and the remaining 5 are dedicated to care from the fortress to the 400-meter-long stepped road between the piers. Shi Xiong never thought of giving the French in the fort a way to survive. The main entrance and exit of the fortress is the wooden pier on the west bank of the Tennessee River. As long as the road leading to the pier is controlled, the French escape route can be cut off. Although there are trails in the swamps to the west and south, the Stone Bear had made 500 cavalry and infantry equipped with burst bear rifles to cross the river several kilometers away from the fortress long before the mortar position was built. On the Tennessee River, a long ambush circle was constructed on the periphery of the swamp. As long as someone dares to walk the path in the swamp, they will be taken care of by these musketeers in every possible way. www.wuxiaspa.com. Ishikama doesn't believe it at all. In front of 500 blasting bear rifles with an effective range of 600 meters, anyone can escape this swamp. Even shooting at a distance of 400 meters is enough to strangle the French from escaping the swamp path. Originally, Stone Bear was a little worried about the crocodiles living in the swamp, but this time is far from when the crocodiles wake up from hibernation. As long as they don't deliberately provoke these terrifying big guys, these crocodiles won't jump out to find trouble. When the soldiers of the 1st Regiment were building their positions and ambush circles, the French soldiers in the Akron fortress had already discovered them, but they had no choice but to watch the small black spots in the distance. Ants are also active. When the mortar position was constructed under the rays of the rising sun, the Stone Bear issued the order to attack. There are all 55 mortars. Let's test fire one shot and measure the distance and direction. Following this order, 15 55 mortars fired at the same time, and 15 sharp whistles resounded through the world. Chapter 421, Dawn and Number 039:T Leave Alive, Part 1. 15 mortars that used flash bombs were set to fire at the same time. Naturally, the scene was not comparable to a single mortar. Although it was only a test shot, the distance of 1,200 meters is really nothing for a 55 mortar. We must know that in the usual training of this group of sighters, the distance between 1 kilometer and 2 kilometers is the most trained. Therefore, when the scream of shells piercing the air was still reverberating in the sky, 15 huge sparks had erupted from the inside and outside of Akron Fortress, followed by loud noises and small black mushroom clouds. Coincidentally, I don't know which cannon fired a cannonball that happened to hit the turret of a fortress gun. Even if the turret on which the fortress gun was placed is so strong, there are special shelters above it. The arches of the existence existed, but under the eruption of a full 400 grams of black powder, the fortress gun still tumbled and fell from the fortress more than 3 meters high. The 4 or 5 French soldiers on the turret who were going to fire the guns were also in the explosion like thatch torn by a hurricane. Their bodies split in an instant, and then they didn't know where they were blown by the shockwave. It is estimated that this is the first time a mortar fire scene has appeared in the New World in North America in actual combat. Therefore, the French who have not seen such a scene are stunned by the spectacular scene in front of them. Compared with the earth-shattering explosion of hundreds of volleys of bullets, the volley of only 15 55 mortars is naturally not that powerful. But the power of a single 55 mortar is much greater than that of a grenadier, and the impact points of the 15 mortars are concentrated in the Akron fortress. The scene is naturally another kind of thrilling. It may be that the impact points are relatively concentrated, so it is estimated that the thick smoke produced by the explosion of 7 or 8 shells has merged together, forming a huge mushroom cloud. The thick black smoke is like the palm of a devil, constantly tossing and rising, adding a kind of fear to this thrilling explosion. The rising black mushroom cloud is like the grinning smile of death, which makes people shudder. Because of the blocking of the fortress wall, Stone Bear could not see the situation inside the fortress, but Stone Bear was sure that after this round of salvos passed, the entire Akron fortress must have suffered heavy casualties. After all, the French in the fortress didn't realize what weapon they were about to face before the gun was fired. But this doesn't matter to Shi Xiong anymore. His purpose of coming here is to completely wipe out this fortress. If Stone Bear first came to Akron Fortress, he still coveted this fortress that occupies a dangerous terrain, but after Bai Yun's death, He had no feeling for this fortress anymore. Unplugging this fortress is Shi Xiong's biggest goal now. Except for the 555 mortars aimed at the mountain road outside the fortress, the other 10 mortars continue to gather fire for 5 rounds. Shi Xiong turned his head and said coldly to the messenger beside him, without any emotion in his tone, only a strong murderous intent. Qin Bingyun quickly issued a semaphore, and a few seconds later, 1055 mortars roared again. The other fortress cannon that was faintly visible on the opposite side was too late to even adjust the muzzle. The rate of fire of the mortar is impressive. Although the 55 mortar produced by Ishigumaru cannot compare with the fire rate of later mortars, if it fires quickly in 1 minute, it can also achieve a terrifying rate of fire of 20 rounds per minute. However, rapid firing will cause greater damage to the barrel, so under normal circumstances, Shi Xiong will not allow rapid firing. In this era, the average shooting speed of 8 to 10 seconds is enough to flatten all enemies in front of him. Now these 10 mortars are basically fired at a rate of 1 shot every 10 seconds. Almost a minute later, the original awe-inspiring Aukron Fortress 1,200 meters away has completely lost its prestige. The walls of Aukron Fortress are very thick, about 1 meter thick, and they are all built with huge rock blocks. This is something that Stone Bear has seen when he first went to this fortress. For such a thick wall, the power of a mortar cannot be completely blown up, but such a thick wall also limits the possibility of escape for those French in the fortress. Anyway, when a full 50 mortar shells fell into the fortress, the entire fortress was filled with thick smoke and raging fires. Although the city wall did not explode, the fortress cannon on the city wall was completely misfired. It is estimated that in the salvo just now, the French soldiers who were going to control the fortress cannon were killed. 50 mortar shells, that is a full charge of 10 kilograms of black powder, plus the fragments of the shells and the iron sand filled inside, exploded concentratedly in a fortress with a diameter of less than 100 meters. The interior of this fortress is estimated to have become hell. Anyway, from the beginning of the first round of the volley to the end of the 6th round, no one in the entire Aukron Fortress ran out. Even on the other 2 sides of the fortress, no one was seen ran out. Stone Bear knows the situation inside Aukron Fortress. Regardless of its majestic appearance, this fortress is actually quite awkward. In the entire fortress, except for the city lord's mansion, which was built with stone, most of the other houses were built with wooden planks, and there were even many broken tents. Under the intensity of the fire, even the city lord's mansion could not be resisted, let alone the wooden houses and tents. This situation made Shi Xiong nodded in satisfaction, and then said to the messenger beside him, "Blow the horn and let the musketeers keep 200 people to continue to monitor the swamps in the south and west, and the others march towards the fortress along the river bank." After a pause, Shi Xiong said to the second messenger, "Let the mortar squad continue to prepare for shooting, and the others are ready to cross the river." With these 2 orders www.wuxiasput.com the soldiers of the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade became busy immediately. Regardless of whether it is a grenadier or a musketeer, in addition to training their respective items in daily training, they also need to receive other training skills, such as engineering skills, simple rescue skills. These are all skills that allow a fighter to survive on the battlefield as much as possible. The logistics soldiers quickly the raft they brought with ropes, and many soldiers began to cut down trees. Since we want to cross the river, we must have enough rafts. When some of the musketeers who set up the ambush ring in the swamp area across the river arrived at the fortress along the river bank, the Stone Bear had already crossed the Tennessee River with a tide raft. By this time, the fire in the fortress had even begun to go out, but still no one escaped from the fortress. Stone Bear can already say with certainty that there is no longer a living person in this Aukron Fortress. Chapter 422, Dawn and number 039 leave alive. Below, there is only 1 gate and 2 small gates in Aukron Fortress. The 4-meter wide gate is facing the east, which is the direction of the pier. A step road connects the gate and the pier on the west bank of the Tennessee River. The other 2 small gates are less than 2 meters wide. One of the small gates is located to the southwest of the fortress, facing the swamp. The other small gate is directly north, facing the wide Ohio River. The entire Auckland fortress is not only garrisoned by the French army, but also hundreds of French colonists live here. Among these colonists, except for a few large aristocrats and wealthy agents, the rest are mostly farmers. These farmers have opened up a large amount of farmland outside the swamp and along the banks of the Ohio River and the Tennessee River, relying on growing food and tobacco for their livelihoods. Of course, there are also some that engage in breeding. Chickens, ducks, cattle, sheep, and horses are all livestock raised by these farmers. It is precisely because of the existence of these farmers that this fortress has opened two small gates. These two small gates are usually used by these farmers to enter and exit the fortress. Shi Xiong led a group of musketeers along the step road to the front and back of the fortress gate and discovered that this heavy gate had become riddled with holes, and many places had been burned through by the fire. The originally sturdy door crashed down with just a light push, and then fell to pieces under the influence of its own gravity. After crossing the doorway, Shi Xiong and the others entered hell. At this time, the Auckland fortress has completely turned into a hell. The raging fire before has been almost extinguished, which of course is because there is nothing to burn in the fortress. The thick smoke that accompanied the fire basically disappeared, and only a few places were still emitting thick smoke. The city lord's mansion that was the most conspicuous in the original fortress has become riddled with holes just like that door. The gate of the original imposing city lord's mansion has completely collapsed. Dozens of corpses that were about to burn into black coal are piled up at the gate of the city lord's mansion, and beside these corpses, there are 2 bullet craters. It is estimated that these people wanted to enter the city lord's mansion to avoid the cannonballs that fell from the sky. As a result, 2 cannonballs exploded beside them, so that these people were killed in one pot. The dense wooden houses that Stone Bear saw when he entered the fortress last time had already turned into piles of black ashes. Only the occasional curls of green smoke seemed to tell their previous identities. The interior of the fortress, which was originally packed with dang, had now become empty like a wilderness. Except for the city lord's mansion that was bombed and collapsed, all the other buildings disappeared. There were bullet craters everywhere, and all kinds of strange bodies burned everywhere. In addition to the dozens of corpses seen at the gate of the city lord's mansion, there were similar situations in front of the 2 small gates. It is estimated that the colonists living in the fortress wanted to run out of the fortress through the small door before the explosion. As a result, they incorrectly estimated the rate of fire of the 55 mortar. As a result, they were dropped from the sky before the small door could be opened. The mortar shells were alive and dead. It is definitely not an exaggeration to describe the entire fortress as hell, and even the air is filled with a smell of roasted meat. Shi Xiong was not surprised by such a situation. The kill radius of the 55 mortar is as high as 12 meters, which means that if a shell falls in an open place, all people within the radius of 12 meters will die. In other words, the damage area of a 55 mortar shell is about 450 square meters. The area inside the entire fortress is only 8,000 square meters, and a full 55 mortar shells exploded here, which is equivalent to covering the inside of the fortress almost 3 times. If the inside of the fortress is built with masonry structure, it is better to say that solid masonry can well withstand the damage caused by fragments, but here are mostly wooden houses and tents. This fragile building material is not much stronger than a piece of paper in the face of the power of a cannonball explosion. Coupled with the fire caused by wooden planks and tents, the number of people burned to death alone is not a small number. Of course, more of this fortress is the stumps and broken arms that can be seen everywhere. Just 5 volleys of 10 mortars have dismembered at least half of the people in this fortress. Under such bombing intensity, it is normal for people to be torn into pieces by the huge explosive force, and those who are burned to death are considered dead. At least they can keep a whole body. "Boss, I found a cellar over there with alive people." A soldier hurriedly ran over to report a piece of news. Shi Xiong followed the soldier to a place located at the root of the east wall of the city lord's mansion. It was no different from other places, and it had been burned to ashes. But under a thick cracked stone slab on the ground, Shi Xiong heard a cry for help. The stone slab was soon dragged away by the soldiers, and a dark hole was exposed. Shi Xiong glanced in, and immediately became happy. It turned out that there was a 4 to 5 meters deep cellar below, and there were 5 people trembling inside, one of whom was a fellow Shi Xiong had known before. What is this guy's name? Well, it seems to be called Orino, but he got a big mouth by himself. Shi Xiong looked at the big fat man who was trembling in the cellar, and flashed in his mind the spokespersons of the great nobles he met when he came to the fortress of Akron that year. This guy named Orino was one of them. But this guy is obviously a very savvy guy, hiding in the cellar with his family when the explosion just started. Not to mention, his choice made him lucky to survive. If he tried to escape Akron Fortress like everyone else, he would have been bombed or burned to death long ago. It may be that Shi Xiong's physique is so amazing www.wuxiaspa.com that Mr. Orino also showed a pleasing look after a moment of stun. Obviously, he recognized Shi Xiong. However, since it has been decided not to keep alive, this Mr. Orino and his family naturally cannot stay. Shi Xiong ignored that guy's flattering smile, but waved at a soldier beside him, and then untied an earthen grenade from the soldier's waist. After igniting the fuse of the grenade with the firefold, after waiting for about 2 or 3 seconds, Shi Xiong threw the grenade into the cellar, and then walked away calmly. A few seconds later, accompanied by a dull explosion, a flame came out from the mouth of the cellar along with thick smoke. There was no sound in the cellar. Clean up this fortress carefully. I don't need the living Vasiku. Stone Bear gathered the more than 200 soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade who had entered the fortress and said loudly, "Also, take a look at this." The extent of the damage to the walls of this fortress depends on whether this fortress needs to stay. P.S. Bo and thank Morning Wu Huaxia 300 for your reward. Chapter 423, Blueprint. When Stone Bear dressed up as the chief of the Chikmun clan came to this fortress to coax the French for the first time, he coveted the fortress. The location of this fortress is really great. To say that the French are actually quite eye-catching, otherwise such a military fortress would not be built here. This fortress guards the Ohio River, Mississippi River and Tennessee River. To the north and northwest, you can go upstream along the Mississippi River, and to the northeast, you can go upstream along the Ohio River. As for the south and southeast, you can go down the Mississippi River. Just go upstream along the Tennessee River. It is not an exaggeration to say that this is actually a waterway traffic intersection, and it is also a very important intersection. If you don't count the mountainous areas in the western part of the New World, just counting from the east of the mountainous areas in the west, you will reach the East Coast, which is almost the geographic center of this large area. Had it not been for a series of things that happened later that caused Shi Xiong to have extreme hatred for the French in this fortress, he would not have ordered the 55 mortar to bomb the fortress directly. However, I thought that the fortress could not survive the bombardment of 55 mortars. I did not expect that the French people of this era were still very responsible. The fortress was built so strong that the buildings inside were all it was blown up, and the thick wall outside was not badly damaged. Since this is the case, just take it down. If we can rely on this and march westward for tens of kilometers, we can knock down the confluence of the Ohio River and the Mississippi River. Then whether it is Cairo or Wycliffe on the east bank of the Mi River, it will be a good place to build a large military fortress. Later Cairo, located on the alluvial delta at the confluence of the Mi River and the Russian River, is not the Cairo in Egypt. This Cairo is only a small city, but its strategic location is very important because it directly guards the Mi River and the Russian River. However, Cairo is flat and sandwiched between two large rivers. It is easy to be flooded when the Mi River and the O River are flooded. But the later American city of Wycliffe, about 10 kilometers south of Cairo, is a good place. Although the place is small, it is a good place to build a military fortress. This small city is located on the east bank of Mi River, facing the river to the west, and surrounded by hills over 100 meters high on the north, east and south sides. By then, as long as dozens of artillery can be placed on the surrounding mountains, the Mi River will be cut off directly. The importance of the Mi River to the entire New World is self-evident. Even in the modern era, more than 200 years later, The Mi River is also the most important inland waterway on the North American continent. If a military fortress with heavy firepower can be built here, then the entire Mi River will be completely in your hands. From there, go north along the Michigan River, enter the Chicago River through the Illinois River, and finally reach Lake Michigan. Even further away, you can enter the Atlantic Ocean. And if you enter the tributaries on the west bank of the Big River, such as the Kansas River, the Missouri River, and the Arkansas River, then you can directly reach the foot of the Rocky Mountains. The entire Central Plain is under control. To the east, there is the Russian River, and it's easy and pleasant to drive to Pittsburgh by boat. Even if you want to enter the Monongahela River, one of the two sources of the Russian River, you can go all the way up to the area where the Cherokee Palace is located. Not to mention the Tennessee River, right next to the Gaoshu tribe. And to the south, along the Mi River all the way down, you can directly reach the Gulf of Mexico. It is no exaggeration to say that if a huge administrative and logistics center is set up here, it will be enough to cover 2/3 of the United States and the 5 largest areas of Hubei. While waiting for the soldiers of the 1st Regiment to inspect the fortress, Shi Xiong's mind suddenly flashed countless thoughts and a magnificent blueprint, and his body began to tremble slightly. Just like the major dynasties in ancient China, they all occupy the central area of the Central Plains, and only then can a huge dynasty be established. In fact, the North American New World is the same. As long as it occupies a core area with an important strategic location, it can radiate all directions in the most labor-saving way. After the founding of the United States in the original historical time and space, it was because it was on the East Coast that it took them nearly a century to move westward and finally unified the entire United States. And if the Americans did not occupy the East Coast, but both sides of the Mi River, they would occupy the entire United States in a shorter time. Similarly, if France hadn't lost the 7 Years' War and had operated on both sides of the Mi River for so many years, perhaps the War of Independence was not fought by the British and Americans, but the French and Americans. In this era without trains, cars and airplanes, ships are the best means of transportation. Pulling a lot and running far is much better than an ox cart or a horse-drawn cart. Therefore, as long as the Mi River is controlled, with a large number of inland river-armed transport ships, it is not too simple to control the Central Plains and the East. Well, the ship matter is a big problem. But it doesn't matter. Isn't the family still holding a descendant of a Spanish third arms dealer? And isn't this guy coveting bullets? Now that I have mortar technology in my hands, it's not that I can't transfer the grenadier technology. It shouldn't be difficult to exchange the technology of the bomb grenades for the construction technology of the inland water transport ship, or even the construction technology of the 3-tier sail battleship. As for the shipbuilding workers, it's a big deal to let the Fernando family or William Hank collect them in Europe. Once the western part of the Great Plains can be captured, will the gold and silver mines in the western mountainous area be far away? With gold and silver, there is no need to worry about someone who can build ships across the oceans from Europe. At that time, we will build hundreds of inland river-armed transport ships, and we will not install those silly, big and clumsy artillery on them. We will install small and exquisite grenades and mortars. www.wuxiaspa.com. Who will be ours then, opponent? Anxious Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu got 20 mortar-equipped inland water transport ships and went directly to Pittsburgh or the Great Lakes. The stone bear standing in the ruins thought about it, the more he felt that his blue picture was very good and feasible. 10,000 steps back, even if the Fernando family does not agree to exchange the construction technology of the inland armed transport ship for the technology of the bombing, what's the harm? These years, there are more people in Europe who can't eat food and can build ships. There are even many ship designers. It's a big deal that Hank will collect a few. Lao Tzu has no idea of contending for the hegemony of the Atlantic for the time being. Now Lao Tzu only wants to control the new continent of North America first. When Lao Tzu has the huge base of the New World in North America, is it not easy to come up with a new type of warship with steel as the hull, steam engine as the power, and large-caliber rifled gun as the main weapon? What Victory or Street Trinidad will have to kneel at that time, I singled out 10 of you one by one. Chapter 424, The Best Chicken, Great Bear, Great Bear. The familiar voice awakened Shi Xiong from his contemplation. Shi Xiong turned his head and saw that it was the guy Kuima, who was originally a little angry and interrupted his contemplation. Can only helplessly grin at Kuima. Since the expeditionary army was changed to the Burst Bear Brigade, Shi Xiong regarded the 1st Regiment as his direct line. There is no way, as the saying goes, government comes out of the barrel of a gun. Don't think that this sentence has only 7 words, but it is this simple 7 words that tells the truth of all dynasties throughout the ages. And how can Stone Bear, whose soul comes from later generations, not take this sentence as the motto of life? If you want to create your own sky in this unfamiliar, primitive and backward world, you must master the most powerful armed forces in your hands. How do you say that? A commander who does not control his own armed forces is not a good Indian. The expeditionary army was made by Shi Xiong himself, and the weapons used by the expeditionary army were all made by him. Why couldn't he build the most powerful armed force for himself? Therefore, the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade became the direct force of the Stone Bear or Gaoshu tribe. The soldiers of the 1st Regiment are all composed of veterans, and they are all fighters from the Gaoshu tribe and the merged Zio tribe, and the weapons, the 1st Regiment, are also the most advanced. Like the 20 mortar squads carried by the Western expedition this time, all belong to the 1st Regiment, but usually these 20 mortar squads will be scattered among the other 4 regiments, and the 500 most advanced bear rifles are also equipped by the soldiers of the 1st Regiment. These 2 most advanced weapons, Stone Bear, will not be put into the hands of others. Shi Xiong doesn't care about what others think. The Burst Bear Brigade belongs to Lao Tzu, and Lao Tzu has the right to do so. Dissatisfied, if you refuse to accept it, you can also engage in a mortar or a bear rifle. Since the 1st Regiment is his own direct line, the head of the 1st Regiment naturally cannot be an outsider. Kuima followed himself on expeditions to the Yuchis, followed by the Krisa and the Powhatans. The war experience is definitely the most abundant among the officers of the Explosive Bear Brigade. In addition, Kuima is one of Shi Xiong's most trusted people, so it is most appropriate for him to be the head of the 1st Regiment. Now, besides Jiao Niu, Red Cloud, and Green Skylark, the only people who can directly call Shi Xiong's name are Kuima. This is enough to prove how close the relationship between the 2 is. Moreover, Kuima and Shi Xiong are the same age, both are 19 this year, and are already a complete adult soldier. He has come to serve as the commander of the 1st Regiment, and no one else can say anything. Kuima, what's the matter? Shi Xiong, who turned his head, asked Kuima. Oh, my brothers have searched the entire fortress, and no more life is found. Well, it's a good job, so let's arrange for 200 musketeers, 5 mortar squads, 40 grenadiers, and corresponding ammunition supplies to stay here, and at the same time let the bird release the homing pigeons and let the tribe. The people here drove over 4 armed inland river transport ships with enough cement and steel bars. A lot of cement and steel bars are needed here. Now that it has been decided to occupy this place, then the defense here must be strengthened. However, the Burst Bear Brigade did not carry relevant materials on this westward expedition, so it is necessary to inform the family so that they can transport the materials by boat. If it was before, the messenger would have to ride back to the Gaoshu tribe, which would take several days. But since I found Mr. Bird during the Eastern expedition, the tribe's carrier pigeon communication network has basically been established. This time, the West expedition Little Bird and the pigeon trainers trained by the Little Bird followed the Burst Bear Brigade and carried dozens of homing pigeons, which greatly facilitated communication. Without these homing pigeons, Shi Xiong would not dare to split his troops. And this time to deliver the message to the Gaoshu tribe, using the carrier pigeon, the letter can be delivered in 1 day. You mean let's take this fortress down? Kuima asked excitedly. If such a good place is returned to the French, wouldn't we be taken advantage of? Shi Xiong said with a smile. Yes, we must take this place, and we must rely on it to attack westward, so here it is. The defense needs to be strengthened. Okay, I'm going to make arrangements. Kuwema turned around and left. Wait, first, tell the brothers who stayed, by the way, clean up the city walls and the interior of the fortress here, collect materials on the spot, and build some sturdy houses with the reinforced concrete. This will be one of us in the future. Important stronghold. Since we are going to occupy this place, in addition to the necessary defenses, some houses similar to military camps also need to be built in the fortress. The 1st Regiment of the 300 left behind soldiers, except for defensive tasks, spent the rest of the time building houses with the delivered materials. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Quickly nodded and agreed, turned and walked away quickly. The weather has warmed up, so the soldiers of the 1st Regiment stayed in the fortress with their tents for one night. After a good dressing up for a night, after having breakfast early the next morning, the remaining 700 soldiers of the 1st Regiment departed. These 700 people will go all the way to the west, sweeping the Chickasaw tribe all the way, and finally reach the confluence of the Russian and Mi rivers, and then go south along the east bank of the Mi River, directly behind the Chickasaw's nest, and west. The Luo army fought back and forth at the main gathering place of the Chickasaw. This was a plan that had been made before the division of troops, and in the past 2 days, according to the news from the carrier pigeons, the westward army had a pretty good offensive momentum in the Chickasaw territory. Although it is active in the Chickasaw territory, and the number of the Western Luo army is far less than that of the Chickasaw. www.wuxiaspa.com. But the Western Luo army holds more than the Chickasaw in their hands. I don't know how much. The advanced weapons of the modern era. The momentum is naturally like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves. You must know that when the Expeditionary Army conquered the Cree South, the Ferguson rifle was in his hand, and there were only 170 grenades. The large tribe of people was defeated. Now 4 regiments of soldiers are attacking the Chickasaw tribe, which has only more than 20,000 people. It is simply an anti-aircraft cannon hitting mosquitoes. If there is any difficulty, it is that the Chickasaws are full of hatred for the Burst Bear Brigade. This kind of hatred accumulated over hundreds of years has made Chickasaw people crazy. When fighting, these Chickasaws full of hatred tend to fight to the end instead of fleeing or surrendering. But it doesn't matter, Shi Xiong didn't intend to leave the Chickasaw tribe anyway. The Stone Bear needs to kill a chicken to frighten the tribes on both sides of the Mi River and even the west, and the Chickasaws who have hated the Cherokee for hundreds of years are undoubtedly the best chicken. Chapter 425, 2 ships for nothing. The West expedition is not as good as the previous South expeditions and East expeditions. In this era without any roads or railways, in this era without cars, trains or even bicycles, all traffic depends on 1, 2, and all roads just stepped out. The most difficult road for the Southern expedition and the Eastern expedition is to cross the Blue Ridge and the Great Smoky Mountains. As long as the 2 mountains are crossed, the remaining roads will be the same. In the West expedition, all the mountains or hills can be seen along the way, and the valleys and flat basins are almost invisible. Even if I walked to the east bank of the Mi River, at first glance, there were still rugged hills everywhere. Moreover, in this era, the vegetation on the ground and on the slopes has hardly been destroyed, which makes the westward march more difficult. Fortunately, the soldiers of the Burst Bear Brigade are all native Indians. Although the road is difficult to walk, they should not be embarrassed. But the marching speed will naturally be much slower. On this day, just led the first group of 700 soldiers to sweep down a Stone Bear from the Chickasaw tribe, and received a letter from the carrier pigeons from the Akron fortress. There are 2 good news. The first good news is that the 4 inland armed transport ships from the Gaoshu tribe are pulling a large amount of supplies. After 6 days of voyage, they finally arrived at the fortress of Akron, and the reconstruction of the fortress of Akron, which was razed to the ground, began. The second good news is that the Gaoshu tribe has 2 more French inland armed transport ships. This second news is purely an accident. It turned out that the 4 armed transport ships transporting supplies in the Gaoshu tribe had just arrived on the 3rd day of Akron Fortress, after nearly half a month of sailing. The 2 inland armed transport ships loaded with various supplies finally arrived at Fort Akron from New Orleans. Both of these ships departed from New Orleans, One of the ship's destination was Fort Akron, and the other ship's destination was Fort Louis military fortress on the upper reaches of the Russian River, near Louisville in later generations. Although the 7 Years' War has been over for 4 years, the French colonists on both sides of the Mi River did not easily cede their territory because of the defeat of France, and the British did not have the power to take over the French at this time, a place as big as Louisiana. So these French colonists living on both sides of the Mi River are still living well. And because of the strength of the United Kingdom, France and Spain are now united. New Orleans was secretly given to the Spanish by the French. Therefore, the various materials needed by the French colonists living on both sides of the River Mi could still flow through New Orleans, along the Mi River and its tributaries to various military fortresses and settlements along the way. The 2 inland river armed transport ships docked in the Akron fortress are dedicated to transporting supplies. Moreover, after navigating on the Mi River for so long and arriving in the safe Fort Akron, the transport ship that is going to the Fort Louis military fortress will naturally take a rest. The later Louisville has not yet been established, but it has long been occupied by the French. The French built a large military fort here, named after today's French King Louis XV. Well, in another 20 years, the Fort Louis will be renamed Louisville, and Louisville will be named after Louis XVI, the grandson of Louis XV. In any case, the current Fort Louis military fortress is the largest military fortress built by the French on the Russian River. The strategic location is extremely important, so the various materials needed there are also extremely large. This ship was used to transport supplies to the Fort Louis military fortress. Because the 1st Regiment of the Bearburst Brigade bombed the Akron fortress and did not destroy the wall, so when the 2 ships arrived at the Akron fortress, they did not find anything abnormal from the outside. In addition, there are still 4 empty armed transport ships moored on the pier, similar in model to their ships, and they are all French transport ships, so the soldiers on these 2 transport ships are even less suspicious. After all, Fort Akron is an important military fortress, located in the core area of French Louisiana. There are hundreds of French soldiers stationed here, as well as fortress artillery defense. It is impossible for anyone to break through here. Therefore, the unsuspecting crew all got off the ship, and followed their captain cheerfully to prepare to go to the Akron fortress. As a result, as soon as they entered the door, they were arrested by the first group of soldiers who were like wolves and tigers left behind. 2 transport ships full of various food and other materials became the bag of the left-behind soldiers of the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade. Compared with the materials delivered by the Gaoshu tribe that arrived at the Akron fortress, the 2 French armed inland river transport ships were a real surprise. Originally, Shi Xiong was short of ships, but he gave away 2 ships for nothing. What is it that is not a good thing? Compared with the materials on board, these 2 ships are undoubtedly much more important. 2 more ships were added for no reason. As soon as Shi Xiong was happy, the soldiers of the 701st Regiment were given a day's rest. Of course, the time of this day is mainly used to exchange information with the left-behind soldiers of the Akron fortress. The Stone Bear wants to tell them how to deal with the French and how to block the news that Akron fortress is occupied. Since there are 2 ships delivered for nothing, it is enough to show that neither the French nor the Spaniards know the news of the Akron fortress being occupied by them. So can we take advantage of this and ignoring a few more ships? As long as the news of Akron fortress's occupation is not spread, and others, especially the French and Spanish, will not know, then as long as it is a transport ship that goes on the Russian River, it will inevitably stop at Akron fortress by then. This kind of good opportunity must be seized well, otherwise there will be no such shop after passing this village. The first group of soldiers who stayed at Akron fortress was led by Das Han. This big mountain is the Big Mountain of the Zio tribe, a powerful archer who was once a member of the expedition team. I'm reading www.hukanshu.com. Followed the Stone Bear to fight the Yuchi. Later, the expeditionary army conquered all the Cree tribe, so the warriors who had stayed in the Zio tribe returned to the Gaoshu tribe, and Das Han naturally became a member of the direct line of troops. Da Shan is now a battalion commander of the 1st Regiment of the Burst Bear Brigade, with about 300 people in his hands, this time staying behind Akron Fortress. Kauai Ma let Das Han's camp stay behind. This fellow Das Han is a good hand at war, but if he is playful, he will be far away. So how to confuse the French or Spaniards must be taught by Shi Xiong. Fortunately, the straight line distance between the first group and Akron Fortress is only 100 kilometers. With the speed of the homing pigeon, the news can be delivered in more than an hour. It took a day for Shi Xiong to tell Das Han what to do, and when the first group opened the next day, another good news was sent through the carrier pigeon. The king's court of the Chickasaw was pulled out by the westward army. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.